everybody. That music can mean but one thing, listeners. It's that time again. That time rolls around every 4 years like clockwork. Funny how it happens that way. Yes, it is time for yet another Options Insider Radio Network Election Night Spectacular. We've been doing this since way back in the primordial ooze days of 2016. Ironically, one of the participants still around. That was certainly an interesting night out there. We'll get to all that fun in a little bit. Speaking of fun, that is kind of our goal for tonight. We're going to walk you off the ledge. We're going to make sure we're not going to get crazy political here on the show. We'll talk about results, obviously, and how they're impacting things. We'll also talk about how they impact markets. What we saw going into this, we'll see some and analyze some historical data from previous elections, how they compare and contrast to right now, and maybe throw in some fun trivia along the way. We're just going to have a good time, so if your candidate of choice is winning or losing, either way, you can tune in. Get away from the pundits, get away from the talking heads and their spin and their bias and everything else, and tune in. Let us walk you off the ledge and have a fun time. We got quite the slate of special guests joining us on the show tonight, listeners. So it's going to be a fun workout for my voice. It's going to be, we're planning roughly 3 hours. Maybe we go longer. Who knows? Depends what's going on out there. Or pretty much as long as my voice lasts. Whichever one cracks first is how long we're planning to go. And joining me, some might say bravely, others might say foolishly, the man who opted in. He said, I will be your Joan Rivers to your Johnny Carson here for our 3-hour extravaganza. The man known around the globe as the once future and present Dr. Vix / V-Stocks, a.k.a. Russell Rhoads. Mr. Rhoads, welcome to the show, sir. Are you already regretting tying yourself down for 3 hours, sir?
Oh, gosh, no. This is, and we'll get into this as we have some downtime, but you and I did this on the fly 12 years ago.
We did. We kind of just made it up.
I know, and that's really what this grew from. And, I am a regular on Vol Views, but even if I weren't regularly on with you right now, I would volunteer, beg and plead, etc., to be on with all of you guys tonight. I'm very excited about this. I'm very excited we can talk about the markets. I'm sitting here watching, and I know we're just doing intros, so I won't say any numbers yet, but I got a couple of different markets open, and this is more exciting than watching VIX trading. And I said that. So who do we got for the first half hour?
We're going to have to change your name to Dr. Binary soon, but we'll get there. Yeah. We'll get all that fun. Yes, joining us to kick off our first half hour of our election night extravaganza, listeners. First, we're not just staying domestic, listeners. We're going across the pond, all the way out to the land known in Roman times as Germania, where we are joined once again by our old pal, Mr. Aash Vyas, now the investment director over there at Residence Capital, as well as he moonlights as an author, or one or two or half a dozen tomes you may be familiar with. Mr. Aash, also, you get the credit, the pride of place of joining us at the latest hour. I believe it is quite late where you're beaming in from, sir. So thank you for joining us tonight.
Have to be here. It's a historic event. Election night. Happy election night, everyone.
Set the scene for us. What's it like in Germany? Was everyone running around waving American flags and eating apple pie?
Not quite. They're all terrified that a certain candidate will win and leave them abandoned to the Russians.
Yeah. There's a different perspective over there across the pond, as we say. And also joining us from a little bit closer to home, we have our old pal, Mr. Kevin Green from the Schwab Network. Mr. Kevin, welcome to your first appearance on our Election Night Spectacular, sir.
Looking forward to it. Seeing a little bit of action in the futures market, so hopefully it's going to be some fireworks tonight, and hopefully those that are listening that are trading are profitable throughout this time.
All right, listeners, let's get down to business then. And business today, if you are in the Uncle Mike camp, who will be joining us later on tonight, a.k.a. a bull, then business was pretty good for you. Now, we were talking for a while leading into the election about vol, and we'll get to all that evolution in the VIX term structure and things in a little bit out there. But we've been saying for how long now on the network, are we going to see just a massive rally maybe after this whole thing is said and done? Hopefully by tonight, but probably more realistically later on this week. Well, the market said, the hell with that. We're not waiting until we have any actual data in hand. We are exploding out of the gate this morning. So we had our relief rally pre-event, which is kind of weird in and of itself. The Dow closing up about exactly 1% today. S&P getting the bit in its teeth, up 1 and almost 1/4%. NASDAQ closing in on 1.5%. So my goodness, all over the place. VIX cash coming in right at the end of the day, right around 20.5. So threatening 20 to the dark side, threatening about 22 to the upside. So kind of all over the place. If you're wondering, these are the 6th consecutive presidential election day gains for the S&P and the Dow. And the NASDAQ somehow skipped one. They only have 5 consecutive election day boosts. Of course, there were other things going on, obviously, than just the relief rally out there today. We had the ISM number showing pretty robust economy out there. So a lot of things feeding into this number, but a lot of people certainly looking at this today and saying, man, maybe we had the rally too early. Who knows? Let's go around the horn. Let's go out to the hinterlands of Germania first, because everyone else is asleep over there except for him. He's so excited by our special tonight and everything going on here. Mr. Aash, what caught your eye? First off, what did you make of this maybe somewhat surprisingly aggressive rally heading into the big event? And then B, what else is catching your eye out there, sir?
Yeah, I think it tends to imply, favoring, one particular candidate. The other kind of things I'm seeing is, you're seeing the movement you're seeing in energy, and particularly financials, kind of support that, that theory. But for the most part, there seems to be some exuberance that will have a peaceful outcome.
Would you call it irrational exuberance, sir? Are you going that far?
No, I don't think so.
Not quite there yet for the irrational side. Kevin, same question for you, sir. Obviously, a lot of people surprised by just the velocity of the upside out of the gate. What do you make of this, and what else is catching your eye now that we're heading into the event itself, sir?
Yeah, I don't think the move today was fully attributed to the election, right? I mean, we had a pretty significant or a decent consolidation sitting at around the 5,700 level for the S&P 500. We did have a nice little bounce today, but we also had, let's say low liquidity if you're looking at the E-mini S&P bid and ask average, if you will. So I think we still need to see some follow through, especially when it comes to the S&P 500. And if we're going to be able to try to fill this gap that we have to the upside, if you're looking at a daily chart, then that could actually happen tomorrow. Now, you kind of talked about that term structure for the VIX. I mean, this has been on our radar for the last 3 months, right? There's always been this kink in volatility. Now it's starting to become a little bit more realized here. And I think for the most part, I think we're still trying to kind of suss out what the remainder of this year is going to be. We also have the Fed on Thursday too. Like, are they going to cut? Seems like they will, with the commentary around that. So I think there's a lot of events, a lot of economic data this week. I think we just had a little bit of a relief rally. Let's see if it's going to be able to hold tomorrow. And I want to see that on large volume. But I do want to kind of be a little bit cautious because of just the lack of liquidity when I'm looking at the futures markets, especially when you're looking at the indexes.
And Mr. Rhoads, the last word is yours, sir. What caught your eye in today's market action, and what else is catching your eye out there, sir?
Well, I'm not going to, not necessarily caught my eye, but just a discussion that I had earlier. I've got a daughter that I will mention a couple of times this evening. She's working for Associated Press this evening, and she is in charge of the numbers for pretty much all of the swing states. I've lost the list, but she basically, the states call her and then she relays the numbers to the people at Associated Press. And she's got Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Ohio, Georgia. Those are all in the states that she's responsible for. So she's very nervous. She's very excited. We've been talking about this all day long. And she goes to GW, or George Washington, in D.C. That's a school that you would expect to be a very liberal school. And she said about half of her friends voted for Trump, which I was really surprised that she did. We don't talk about, who I think she should vote for and that kind of stuff. I just let them decide that on their own unless they bring it up. But I was really surprised to hear that from, if you hear that from a college student, they're usually at University of Alabama, not at George Washington in D.C. So we'll see if that's a tell or not.
All right, I see some folks in the chat saying it's a little quiet. Let us know. We boosted it up a little bit for you. We want to make sure you folks have a good listening experience. So if you have any issues, let us know over there. Let's go around the horn. Kevin, I know you're not just watching vol and VIX. You're also watching a lot of the broad commodity markets out there. I neglected to set the table fully at the top of the show. We had vol coming in, equities rallying, but also we had gold rallying slightly today, up about 0.25% at the end of the day, but still rallying into today's uncertainty. And then we have crude oil getting a nice lift. WTI closing looks like north of the 72 handle, which puts it up about 1%. What caught your eye on the commodity space out there today, Kevin?
Well, what I'm really kind of focusing on for tonight in the commodity space as a whole here is going to be really kind of three different areas. So obviously looking at crude oil, I feel like that's the cleanest of the bunch when you're looking at the commodities for the election trade and getting a sentiment on what the market's going to feel, just based on the policies between the current administration and then the former Trump administration, and the concern of drill baby drill and what have you. When you're kind of looking at those previous policies that we saw in the Trump administration, is really trying to encourage Middle Eastern production, especially when you're looking at Saudi Arabia. And so there's obviously going to be a trade of maybe fading crude, even though it's already been fading crude potentially because of increased competition and not only just trying to double down with shale production here. So I'm looking at crude. I'm looking at the 10-year rate futures. So I think that's also going to be a pretty telltale sign there. And then I'm also looking at soybeans. So obviously the grain complex very compressed right now. When you're looking at production levels and inventory levels very high, exports are starting to kind of increase and get a little bit of a bump here. But once again, you kind of go back to what is the policy that we see in the previous two, the last two administrations, right? They're pretty much on the ballot here today. And I'm going to get a sense if we see, grain fade, I think that's probably more of the Trump trade. And if you don't see grains really fall off the map, then I think that's going to be the Harris trade there. So that's what I'm keeping my eye out on for the futures market. And that's really what caught my eye today. Gold, I feel like gold has kind of been its own secular trend right now. And so I'm really cautious on trying to, call top, bottom, or what's actually happening with it. I just know that until we actually see the peak or the finishing of Fed rate cuts, that's probably when we're going to see the peak of gold, and then we start to range bound, just like we've seen in the past. You can also look at the 2-year, 10-year spread to get an indication of that as well. So I outside of that, that's kind of what I'm looking at when it comes to gold. There's really no more rhyme or reason to it. I think a lot of speculators are getting into that. You have the central banks, doubling down and increasing physical purchases. So there's definitely a secular shift that's happening with that product.
All right, let's look at some shifts out there on the vol front as well. I'd be remiss if we didn't talk about that to kick off the show here with Dr. Vix and, of course, Aash. I'm sure other guests later on will want to chime in as well. I said we're at about a 20.5 coming into the event right now tonight. Of course, we were threatening a 22 earlier today and even threatening a 20 handle out there. If you're wondering how this compares to some recent elections, obviously 2020, bit of an oddball year, outlier year. So obviously vol was, by the time we got to November of 2020, we were fully in the grips of the pandemic. Vol was obviously elevated. We were at about a 35 double at that point of the year. So again, a bit of an outlier, but obviously much higher than it is right now. And then of course, back in 2016, heading into right around the first week of November, so right into the election, VIX cash was at about a 16. So certainly compared to where we are now and back in 2020, it was comparatively mild. Mr. Aash, what are your thoughts, sir, on vol, how it's shaping up and how it's pricing the election right now, sir?
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's slightly elevated as a function of the uncertainty, but if you look at the term structure, it seems relatively flat, as far as steepness and that sort of thing going out. So, for now, it seems to have priced in to be indicating a price of a certain amount of inefficiency or uncertainty, but nothing out of the ordinary. I mean, it seemed much steeper back in 2020. Granted, with the pandemic.
Many things were much steeper back in 2020, sir. Does that surprise you that they're not really putting perhaps as much juice into this as perhaps you expected?
No, because I think there were bigger issues and bigger unknowns back then.
Yeah, the lingering prospect of impending doom was certainly lingering back in 2020. So at least we don't have that to deal with right now, which is nice. Mr. Rhoads, same question for you, sir. What are your thoughts on vol as it stands right now, sir, and how they're pricing vol into the event itself?
Well, I really don't. You know, the fearful thing about participating in this evening is I'm afraid people are going to hate me for saying one thing or another. But I do think as the day was going along and we started hearing some exit poll numbers out of Florida, especially some places that Trump didn't do particularly well in Florida back in the day. But as that started coming out, it seems like the equity market started grinding higher as the day went along. Now, we know that exit polls had Kerry winning this thing a while back, and that did not hold true. But I do think that part of the market reaction today is I think the market started to price in a Trump victory because if anybody's going to choose violence, to use the Game of Thrones term, everybody assumes it would be the Republicans and not the Democrats. Well, the Republicans won't choose violence if they win. So I do think that the market is starting to price in a Donald Trump victory.
Speaking of Trump and actual results, we kicked it off at 6 p.m. Central here, listeners. And already some polls are closing out there. We got a couple of good prizes in the offing right now. The big one, the big prize right now is Georgia. I think given all the heat on Georgia the last few cycles out there, I don't think anyone expects to know those results fully by the end of the night. But Georgia is the big dog right now, 16 electoral votes. And we have Virginia. That one probably is still in play out there, 13 electoral votes there. Indiana coming in at third, 11. Probably going to go red over there if passes prologue out there. South Carolina probably also going to swing that way as well, but I guess we'll see. Kentucky probably going to go red. Vermont probably going to go blue, but we shall see. So those are your big prizes here at 6 p.m. That adds up to 60 cumulative electoral votes available right now. Coming up at 6:30, so we got some weird times popping off here. We have North Carolina 15, so that's a pretty rich prize. And then, of course, everybody's favorite, Ohio 18. That is one of the key prizes. Many people think whoever wins Ohio could win this thing, or of course you could say Pennsylvania as well. But either way, some rich prizes there, and then West Virginia probably going to go red if passed as prologue out there. Mr. Rhoads, do you recall when back in 2016 we were chatting up some numbers and all of a sudden you said, hey, I think Trump just won Ohio. Do you recall that moment, sir? I certainly do.
I do recall that moment, and I've also got a chart somewhere that I'll probably dig out at some point tonight, showing every time Trump won a battleground state back then, VIX went up a couple of points. Or the front month VIX future did. I'll be very specific with that. But you could actually see it. It's kind of VIX would just kind of mess around, and then he won Pennsylvania. Boom. And so on. But you could see the step ladder up as he won the battleground states that nobody expected him to win. I've got the AP open, and
are they calling some of them? Okay.
Well, I've got the AP feed open because that's who my daughter's working for, and they've got him leading Virginia right now.
Really?
If he wins Virginia, this thing's over.
That would be a big get.
They also had him losing Georgia, and they just flipped him to winning Georgia. So they're just putting what the trend is in there without calling some states.
Remember, listeners, if you don't like the results tonight, you think one of the states is wrong, blame Russell's daughter. No,
that's right. It's her fault. She's putting the numbers in. She is. I'm so proud of her. I just can't even imagine.
That's awesome. I'm glad to see that she's part of the process. Let's go back to what we were talking about earlier a little bit here with the evolution of vol. This is obviously a big story. Every election cycle, people come in and talk about it. I recall, of course, back in early 2020, Matt, Amberson, and others who will be joining us later tonight as well, really getting fired up about, October, far too bid back in the beginning of 2020. Of course, we all know what happened a few weeks later, late Jan, early February. Something else kind of took our attention away from the election bump in VIX futures. But fast forward, or I should say rewind, really, to this year. And we have some numbers here. Let's go back now. Let's do some monthly snapshots of what we were pricing in The October future back in mid-February, the cash was at about a 12 3/4. The Oct future 20.3, so a pretty decent premium, a little over 7.5 points to the upside. March, we had the cash a little bit frothier at about 14.90. The Oct future at about a 21. So things looking a little bit spicier there in March. April, we have 21 double for the Oct future, the cash at 18.79. So the cash closing that gap quite a bit. Things looking almost close to backward at that point. So things getting a little frothy on the front portion of the curve there as well. In April, May, let's see, the cash settling back down 12 1/4. The Oct future, and again, October is where you're going to see that election bump, listeners, is 17.91. So you're back to about 5.5 points there on your premium. June, middle of the year, middle of summer, usually a quiet time. The cash 12.66 and the October future 18.30 out there, listeners. So still maintaining that pretty much that premium we had for most of the year. July, let's see, the cash 12 1/4. So July, this is July 12th, by the way. So Vol getting smoked a little bit. And October future 17.45, still hanging out about 5 1/4 points there. August, let's see, August, usually a quiet time, but Vol getting a little bit frothier. 14.83 this date here. This is August 16th. And the Oct future was 18.02. So obviously the cash getting a little bit spicier there. September, we all know what happened in September out there. The cash 16.35, September 13th, and the Oct future 18.2. So that, with the cash getting a little bit spicier, we see that premium collapsing to less than 2 points there. Last month, October 11th, again, these are the snapshots, listeners. The cash 20 1/3, and the October future 21. So obviously, as October slides into that pole position, we also see some intriguing evolution. They're now, of course, coming in as of last week. We have November in the pole position, and we have that futures at a 20 and the cash at a 21. Mr. Dr. Vix, we'll start with you, sir. What's catching your eye out there in the evolution of the term structure this year?
Well, the thing that really got me, and I want to bring this part up because we've got our European representative on, but you know, it appears that the VSTOXX term structure over the past week or so started to just kind of brush off the election and go back to that seasonality that we're used to with a dip in December, where we're not seeing the same sort of lower price for the December VIX future versus the other futures along the term structure. It's still only about a 45-cent drop from January to December. So that change where it looks like the VIX term structure is pricing in not that this is definitely going to happen, but the possibility that this becomes a drawn out event. That, you know, I think VIX is showing that and VSTOXX is not. I'm not sure which one is correct.
All right, and Kevin, I know you're coming up against it. I believe you have a soccer game or something tonight, sir. Is that what you're going out to?
Coaching basketball.
Oh, you're coaching. All right, good for you. How old are the kids?
He's 7 years old.
So, sweet. So they're already dunking already.
Oh yeah, getting him started early.
All right, well, give us your thoughts on the evolution of the Vol surface this year, sir, and then any other closing thoughts you want to leave us with, sir.
Yeah, you know, once again, I think when you're kind of looking at the term structure for the majority, ever since the November contract or the October contract was actually on, I mean, we've seen this, you know, heightened volatility, and we see a pretty nice drop off when it comes to December. So I think the market's already going to be pricing in the, you know, holiday trade, obviously, and then, you know, once again, we'll get through this. What I will say though, just my final parting thoughts. Just kind of going through the map, it's going to be a long night. Like, you kind of parse through it. If you're kind of looking at some of the trends right now, it's going to be a long night. I don't know if the market completely has this priced in right, and that's all I will say. I'm not going to say one way or another, but there's definitely some laggards there, especially when you're looking at states like Indiana and Kentucky. But obviously, they're going to go for Trump. But if those type of trends that we see, that lag of 3.5 percentage points in some of these rural counties, that actually does hold in some of these states like Pennsylvania, I don't think Iowa's really going to be a contender, but you could make the case maybe even in Iowa or what have you. I think it might be something that's more of a little bit more of a nail biter. So I don't want to get out ahead of this right now. It's going to be a long night. We've traded these things before, and I just recommend if anybody's trading these overnight, is make sure it's capital that you can lose and you have the right risk parameters in place, because we can definitely see massive shifts as moves come in. Yeah, I appreciate you guys having me on the show.
All right, now go teach those 7-year-olds how to dunk, sir.
Will do.
There's nothing more American than that, right?
That's right.
All right.
Have a nice night.
Have a good one. And Mr. Aash, sir, while you're busy enjoying your apple pie with the side of sauerbraten and perhaps a nice Wiener Schnitzel, what are your thoughts on how Vol has evolved, or perhaps not really evolved? As we just pointed out, that premium was mostly pretty static throughout the year, sir, in terms of the election juice.
No, I think it was, but I think one of the things we have to keep in mind too is the evolution of the vol markets themselves, particularly in the S&P and the daily and shorter term options, and perhaps a gamma wall that VIX may have to overcome, barring a huge unexpected event and that sort of thing. The other thing that I thought was interesting as it pertains to the election was where the candidates were campaigning towards the end there. Like the Republicans were campaigning in New Mexico, Virginia, and New Hampshire, of all places, which, would seem, not the best use of their time unless they actually think they can flip them. Right. So I think that's interesting. I think Russell talked about the possibility of Virginia. The last poll I saw, New Hampshire was actually 50-50, which is very surprising to me for a New England state to be that close. And the only other thing was, the other thing that seems different this time is with the early voting, it seems like there was more of a Republican turnout. So all of those things are different from what I think we saw last time. And probably the last thing I would say, I would, it's getting late for me out here as well, is echo what Kevin said and say that, we saw this in 2016. You can get pretty wild swings trading this stuff overnight with this kind of uncertainty. So, a bit of caution is probably prudent.
Well, sir, I appreciate you staying up late for us. Now you can go polish off that sauerbraten and have a good night, sir. And hopefully when you wake up, we'll at least know what the hell happened tonight, right?
Yes, it's nice to be part of history with you.
Yes, Mark. I'm glad you could join us, sir. Give us the international perspective over there. Make sure you check out Mr. Aash on Amazon as well, under his pen name, A.K. Vyas, putting out some great tomes. If you want, maybe, let's say, I don't know, an evil, globe-trotting, derivatives trading trader, or I should say terrorist, who also does a side business in murder and kidnap for hire, then maybe check out some of his work. He does some interesting stuff there, sir. And he also has cornered the market on Westerns, if I do say so myself. So when he's not busy crunching the vol numbers, he's putting out some fun tomes you may want to check out. Search for A.K. Vyas, V-Y-A-S, listeners, on Amazon if you want to learn more. All right, Mr. Aash, go to bed, sir. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, guys. Have a good night.
All right, and as we kick off Mr. Aash and Mr. Kevin, we are now joined. It's just a hot swap tonight, listeners. People are coming fast and furious throughout the night, so strap in. We've got a fun 3 hours for us. Next up in the old hot seat, joining myself and Mr. Joan Rivers is, of course, the Rock Lobster himself, beaming in from the shores of Maine. How's it going, sir?
It's going good. I'm following up a bona fide author.
Oh yeah, Aash is big time. He's written about, I don't know,
wow.
close to at least 5, maybe 10 novels right now that actually sell pretty well. He's got the market. I was joking, but he has the market cornered on Westerns these days. He's huge in the Western space, and he has some other ones, thrillers and some children's books as well. So yeah, when he's not crunching the vol numbers, Aash has really been moonlighting seriously as a real professional, honest-to-goodness novelist, and they're fun.
Yeah, like that's somebody that's some real talent. I can't believe I'm following a guy like that.
We're not messing around on the election night spectacular, right? We bring the heat.
I guess you bring the big gun. You bring the heat.
We bring the heat. Well, we'll get your thoughts in a second, Mr. Rock Lobster, but first, we do have some results coming in, kind of playing out the way we expected it, listeners. As I said at the top of the show, Indiana probably going to go red, and that is the case. That has been called now by the AP. Again, we're looking at AP, trying to avoid, whenever possible, any quote-unquote biased sources. I know everyone's going to have an issue with every source, but we're trying to keep it down the middle here, listeners. AP is about as down the middle as I think you could get. And of course, you got to trust Russell's daughter punching. I think she's punching in good numbers, so I trust her. So Trump gets Indiana. That gives him 11 electoral votes. West Virginia, no surprise there. That gives him 4 more. And Kentucky, 8 more electoral votes. So that brings Trump up to 23 on the board. Harris right now getting Vermont. Again, no big deal. No surprise there. As a born and raised Southern New Englander, we know most of New England's probably going to go blue. There might be some surprises. We talked, Aash mentioned New Hampshire out there. They're showing in the AP poll that it's leaning blue right now. They're also showing Virginia leaning blue here, which probably expected, but Russell was saying perhaps might go. The South Carolina, obviously, leaning red. Florida, leaning red, looks like. And Georgia, leaning red, but it's still early in the counting there. All right, Mr. Rock Lobster, sir, the table is set. A pretty wild day. Let's start there. What caught your eye in today's somewhat surprising rally, sir?
Yeah, I think the betting markets, like you see, like a lot of the online stuff hasn't really moved. I mean, it moved huge over the weekend. You remember that? Like there's a huge swing of the betting lines that almost like they were even again, like all this money flowing out, and then they dropped like 55-45 ish in favor of Trump, and then like Monday, basically vol started coming off Monday pretty early, and then Tuesday. So I think mostly there's some just fatigue. Like right now, the separation between live vol and realized vol, what I'm telling our subscribers, students, and option pit is like it's the biggest disparity we've seen in a long time. Like for broad market, it's huge. I would probably could use a Russell Rhoads number. I don't remember seeing it that big in any election. Like 2020, remember, like it was like we were coming like the COVID thing. It was another winter of whatever despair, and oil was in the ash can. And I think everybody was kind of like weary of the whole COVID thing. VIX was like 30 something, but VIX was very high, but SPX was at the lows for the year that wasn't the COVID lows. So remember, we kind of had that, the summer euphoric rally when we all survived, and then and then the sentiment got really poor, and then election came, and then we had like a week later, miraculously, Pfizer found their cure, and then stocks basically took off. Then we had the wild days of 2021. But right now, like from a vol point of view, so a lot of the heat is came off of VIX, and the VIX futures actually came down. So from like close 20.5 maybe on Friday, the November contract, and I think we're down in the 18. 18.5, 19, the November contract. So that's a pretty solid amount coming up. So somebody somewhere is starting to sell the volatility. Stocks kind of broadly rallied. So Trump's been favored for a week in the betting polls at least. So again, anytime somebody's favored, it's more certain. But also what's certain is the damn election will be over today. So again, the results, who knows? But at least we know we don't have to listen to the damn commercials anymore. I think there might be, I think this whole thing has been going on for a month. And I think there's just some, like I call vol fatigue, when volatility is very high, the market's really not doing anything, but nobody's selling any juice, like in a big amount. And that really didn't start happening. Well, I think there's all fatigue set in finally to kind of some sellers finally decided to step in and start selling it. But this week's straddle and the SPX was what, 16, and I don't even think it was that expensive. What was it, $13? It was $13 SPY, $130 SPX for November 8th. I have to say, it feels light to me, to be quite honest. But and that was $16, $17 last week, pretty solidly the whole week. So it's the fact we maybe didn't do much last week overall. And now we have, we're basically, like I said, we're elections today. Votes are coming in. We likely, the fact that we don't have results, by the way, in the same day is, I think we're the only 100 countries that get results faster than the United States does in the globe, which is pretty ridiculous. But anyway, the election will be over. We'll have a winner, I hope, and we hope that the tail risk that the market was pricing does not come to pass. And who knows what that would be, but when you're trading and you're trying to price something that is kind of an unknown, and I think that some of that pricing came out today, and some of the upside in VIX pricing came out today as well. So overall, just a deflation in the bubble, but not an all clear sign by any stretch.
I'm just checking here. We got our chat saying Dade County, Miami is coming in heavily for Trump, which does seem to be, it's trending on Twitter right now. So that does appear to be the case. We also got him pointing out that the DJT is up about $7 in extended hours. That appears to be the case. You're right. It got halted, I know, at least once today, maybe multiple times. This thing had quite the range today. 40 3/4 to the upside, 31.45 to the downside. It closed at 33.94, and in the after hours up, you're right, 763, or about 22.5%. This thing in its last quarter made what, less than $1 million in revenue, $7 billion market cap. So it is truly, I mean, we'll probably get to this more later, but it is truly an election binary. It's 0 or 100, or somewhere in that range, depending on the outcome of tonight. Kind of crazy. Also, we got some love coming in here for Aash's books. He says our listeners say the Shannon Dumas books he has are pretty solid reads. Yeah, he's quite the Western auteur over there. So a lot of intriguing stuff. But Mr. Rhoads, I know I was joking earlier about AP being impartial, but you have a serious update for us, sir.
Yes, I do. Well, I swear I'm not gonna talk about my daughter every time you turn to me, but. She had, all of the people that are working on the data part of the election, they had a big orientation for them late last week, and they couldn't have emphasized enough that we are neutral. We are here to report the numbers, and that's it. If you get some numbers and you don't like them, tough, put them in. This is your job. So they were in. Most of the networks do use AP. And I've got Bloomberg on right now, and I've got a couple of other networks. And every time they claim a state or say a state's been won, they refer to AP. So, she as she jokes, she's got the whole world at her fingertips right now. Not really. She's one of a lot of people that are doing
the election is literally at her fingertips right now, sir. So might be some hot money flying her way in the next few hours to push some buttons. We shall see. We shall see out there. If the binary markets are to be believed, we'll get to all that fun in a bit. That could be the case as well. But Mr. Rhoads, I saw you just tweeted out a throwback to the 2016 election, looking at the VIX futures and the S&P futures. You want to break it down really quickly for our listeners who are not following? Oh, sure.
So I found a slide there's a little bit more to this story. I had a lunch presentation in Milwaukee the day after the 2016 election. And I basically, every time I would go out and about back when I worked at SIBO at the time. I got up and I said, well, I'm supposed to do a teach-in on VIX, but who wants to talk about what happened last night? And on the train down to, or up to Milwaukee from Chicago, I made a chart that I just tweeted out, and it's basically the November VIX futures going up, getting, just moving up, and the S&P futures limit down, and it's really hard to see, but I always love to hang my hat on this. The VIX futures did start going down before the S&P futures came off limit down and started going up. I don't get paid to say this anymore. But I always say things that I believe. You do want to be paying close attention to that VIX future if you're starting to try to get an idea as to how the markets are taking whatever information we get tonight. And it'll, it's not doing much of anything right now. It's just kind of goofing around. Then also, I did want to note that Andrew brought up the implied vol on the November 8th options. What's kind of interesting was the implied vol on the at the money implied vol for SPX options was really high relative to other days for tomorrow's options. You can kind of guess that. That number's up around 30 now. It's right at 30 if you average the call and the put. Then when you go out to November 7th, it's 27. And when you go to November 8th, it's around 25. Those numbers were higher last week. It's not like it started to come down after the election. And we were blaming the FOMC announcement on Thursday for that one. But again, I'm going to go along with my whole, it feels like the market is starting to act like, I don't want to say this is going to be a non-event, but it's not going to be a huge volatility event. And I feel like it's been showing up in the market pricing. It showed up in the way that the markets behave today, but then also looking at how the risk is being, it starts to diminish right after tomorrow's options expiration. That makes me think that maybe this will not be a long, protracted, drawn out thing. Maybe Pettifree can pay out the winners before January 7th.
There's no way.
You knew I was going to use that.
No way you're prying your money from Pettifree's cold, dead hands before January 7th, sir. There's no way.
I like that.
He's not paying you a cent until January 7th.
Hell no, he's making the interest off that money.
I know you do a lot with the Kalshi. Is Kalshi the same payout structure? Are they Jan 7th as well?
I got to check. I did not look at the rule, the absolute rules on the contract. It does. Oh, it says the outcome has to be verified from the office of the presidency.
Oh.
On the Kalshi one. So I don't know.
I guess that means Jan 6th, doesn't it?
Yeah. Well, I mean, hell, if they had been depending on the office of the presidency saying it, they wouldn't have got. I mean, Trump never said it. So
does that mean Biden could declare it right now and they have to pay you out by a Kalshi's rules? I don't know.
That contract's still open.
Yeah. So the contracts are still open as well, and then they after the contract closes, they'll pay you out 2 hours later. Timeline and payout. You know what? They're using January 20th for theirs.
Oh, wow. Even later.
They're using January 20th.
Not just, it doesn't have to be.
This market will close following the inauguration of a non-acting president for the term beginning January 20th. And, that non-acting is not such a bad thing to throw in there. Because I don't want to be all dark and everything, but, Biden is getting up there. And, God forbid something happens to him health-wise between now and January 20th, Kamala Harris could serve as president for a couple of months.
I love how we're giving Pettifree a hard time for not paying out until Jan 7th, but Kalshi's going all the way.
Kalshi's
you have to be inaugurated. Forget about certified. And not until you put your hand on the Bible will they release a single red cent to anyone out there. Interesting. Andrew, how much attention have you been paying to these binary markets out there, sir?
Well, we've been paying so much attention that it like how do we do this stuff? So yeah, I was watching them. They popped up in my IB screen every day. So every day I saw it. So it gives you a good flavor. I mean, you're used to. The stock market in general, it's just people like their opinion. Your opinion is your position, right? When you trade or you invest, like, okay, I think that's going up. I'm going to buy it. So I think in general should be a more real, indicator because at the beginning, when Harris first came out, it was pretty strong. Harris, she came out with a big bang. the shock of just Biden resign, and I guess quit the race. What do you call that? Abdicating the race. She came out hard in the betting line. She was big favorite. So it's shifted over time. So so I think there's some. I think it's a decent indicator for what's going on. But yeah, I did watch them, and it was interesting. I like the idea of a mixed presidency House meeting. One party's kind of got some power somewhere to kind of kick the other party. Like, I think it's great that both parties kick each other in the teeth. I think it's necessary. I'm not thrilled with one party running the whole show because I haven't seen either one of them do that good of a job doing it. So, but and the betting lines are kind of, I think it's a little more even there on the betting lines with ends up with the Senate or the House. So, I think they have been useful. But speaking of the internet thing, I saw the funniest thing. Like somebody, I guess, for the first time ever, Amish people were voting in Pennsylvania. They were, and I didn't think they voted before, but something happened. The FDA came and shut down a cheese making thing or something with the Amish community, and they got all bent out of whack. So I guess they mobilized 100,000 Amish people to vote. So we'll see how that actually turns out. But somebody I know you kind of like your the Star Wars, Lord of the Rings type of Eye of Sauron stuff. Kind of likened it to like the wood people coming out and on the internet, taking on the Eye of Sauron. So I thought it was kind of
the wood people.
It's kind of funny. The wood people coming out and like, listen, we're getting even. So I thought that was kind of a funny answer.
Those are your people, your fellow woodworkers. You should love them.
Yes, they're quite skilled, actually. I am but a pittance compared to the high level master.
Can you erect a barn in like 20 minutes? I don't think so, sir.
I cannot. I try to. I'll send you the pictures of my pallet shed. I'm practicing for my chicken coop debut this spring. So I threw together a pallet woodshed. I'll send pictures so you can mock my buildings.
I shall await them with bated breath, sir, as we check out what's going on right now on these quote-unquote prediction markets. I say prediction. Normally I'm the one, listeners, I'm out here championing really, at the end of the day, any real money market, because it's usually going to be a much better predictor than any sort of other analysis you can do. We see this in the financial markets all the time. At the end of the day, what analysis people put into things that they spend their hard-earned money on, usually they put a lot more effort into that than, let's say, the response to a poll or some sort of market research they do, or whatever the case may be. But I started to kind of keep an eye on these binary markets. It wasn't that long ago, about a month ago, I would say, when we had the folks from IB on, and they were all giddy because Kalshi had just gotten approved, which meant they kind of piggybacked on that lawsuit as well. So they got to launch. We were joking about Thomas's, but he has this Forecast EX that they created. They launched their own event binaries now. And kind of watching these markets evolve over time has been fascinating. And also, as someone who's been doing this for a while, kind of the hair on my back of my neck started sticking up when I was like, I might smell some skullduggery in this. But right now, as we're looking at this list and looking live on Kalshi, they're bouncing around. Trump is right now 63%. So he is definitely surging. He was down to about 49%. I want to say this is just from a couple of sessions ago, November 2nd. So he has surged quite a bit. Harris was at about 48, almost 49%. That was back around that same time frame. Now she has dropped to 37% right now. That is on Kalshi. If you look at the Forecast EX markets, you have Harris. Will she win? She's at a 39 cents, which is effectively 39%. The binaries are priced as probabilities, listeners. And Trump is at 66. So we're seeing some similar action. But what caught my eye, and I'd like to get Russell's thoughts on this as well, because I know he's been working with the Kalshi folks. He's been looking at these markets for quite a while, is how these markets really started to diverge. Even a few months ago, people were coming on this network and they were like, oh, it's in the bag for Harris. It's in the bag. All the early polling data says she's in the lead here, 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 and here. And I cautioned everyone even then. I was like, we don't know the day of who's going to win this thing, let alone a couple of months out. But no sooner did we start hearing that than it really looks like it was about a month ago. I want to say it was around October 8th when we started to see some, let's just say, divergence in these markets. I pulled a screenshot here from what we were looking at back when we were talking about this with the IB folks on October 8th. And at the time, their markets, Trump was at 48% and Harris was at 52%. So she was at a slight majority probability to win, ever so slight out there. What happened shortly thereafter that, on October 10th, looking here at Kalshi, we started to see just extreme divergence. Trump bid all the way up to 65, 68% maybe. That really started me thinking, I think there's some skullduggery here, especially when we started seeing these markets advertised as effectively being great predictive markets. And so what you saw now is these markets being advertised as effectively poll results. It doesn't take a genius to think, well, if they're spending billions of dollars on a campaign, allocating a few million, and of course, Wall Street Journal did some digging. They uncovered this quote-unquote French whale who spent about $30 million on Polymarket, a different market, but they all tend to move kind of in lockstep. $30 million to bid up Trump. They tried to uncover whether he had any political ties. They were unable to do so, but it certainly seemed like a bit of a question mark. So when you're seeing all these markets being advertised everywhere as effectively being predictive, more accurate than the polls, it's not a logical leap to think someone would just spend a few million, 10 million, 30 million, whatever the case may be, and now all of a sudden you have a poll that you purchased that looks the way you want it to. So that really kind of started raising my hackles. But Russell, I know you've been watching these markets for a while. You've been, I think, working with the Kalshi folks for a bit too, so you're pretty familiar with their products. What are your thoughts of these markets, and also kind of what we've been seeing from them over the course of this cycle, especially this wild divergence we saw over the better part of the last month, sir?
Yeah, I couldn't, where they started to widen out, and when I say widen out, and as we've been talking, since we started, Trump's gone from 52 to 67%. I mean, I don't know what's really, I'm trying to watch a whole lot of things at once, and we're 4 minutes from getting a lot of states, but I don't think there was a whole lot of volume dollar-wise. In fact, even just a couple of weeks ago, when you look, you can see the dollar volume, and the dollar volume on Kalshi was only about 30 or 40 million bucks. It's $281 million now that is being wagered just on the who will win the presidential election. And that one of those spikes for Trump was finally a good lesson for me to use in the classroom on how liquidity works. Because somebody did put a lot, like you said, that French whale or whoever bet that, the rumor is 30 million bucks on one side of this thing. Well, you've got to find the other side of it in a very, very illiquid market, and a market that not a whole lot of people are looking at. Plus, there was a moment where you could have paid 49 cents for Harris to win and 48 cents for Trump to win on a different site. So, if Sam Bankman-Fried were not in jail right now, we would have an entity that would take advantage of those arbitrages and keep this market more efficient. We got to spring that boy tonight to help us out. And for people that don't know, that's how he originally made money, was he figured out there was a way to trade between South Korea and the U.S. on Bitcoin where the prices were very different.
You should make that a hashtag tonight. Hashtag free SBF.
That's the old Raise Bandits.
Yeah.
Those guys made like millions of dollars just taking, when all the old option wars in the 90s.
Yeah.
Right. You're trying to win volume from the other exchange. As a market maker, you just gave up a bunch of money to the other floor. It's crazy.
You mean our buddy Henry, the Flow Master, who was an infamous Raise Bandit back in the day?
Yeah.
I did not know that. I knew he had
it probably seeded his venture for a trade alert.
It probably did. He probably took some of that out of my own pocket. Just selling me 100 Delta calls all day in my face.
The irony of him coming back on your show after you financed his trade alert thing is pretty sweet. You have to ask him.
He owes me. He owes me. Well, he's working to pay me back. He's getting there slowly but surely. He's working. He's working out there. As we keep on working here on the thing, what were you guys up to in the pit? Do you guys have any analysis you guys are doing for the election night today, sir?
Yeah, I mean, we were doing these tonight. We've just mostly been concentrating on sort of the winners and losers. You know, we've got some ball trades on, obviously, post-election.
Let me guess, long a boatload of puts.
Yeah, long some ball puts. I mean, they're not even, the reality was, you know, because you had the curve kind of back, like, overall, I didn't think they were that expensive, to be honest. Like the 17 puts for $1, it's not very much, I didn't think. Especially when market vol was so low. Like there was no vol going into this. People wanted stocks, so it's like there was a lot of very odd, currents going into it. It's like if Russell was talking, if he, I can't remember stocks being this high, live vol being this high, and realized vol being this low. I've never seen that I can remember the level we had in the last month. I can see one or the other, but not kind of all three of those things happening. I think it's the first time that at least in the last 10 years since I was market option pit looking at VIX every day, I've never seen that. Which if you never see it and it happens once, that means it can happen again. After I've learned anything about trading, if you've never seen it again, I've never seen this before. Then it happens, it'll happen again. So just as a little reminder.
I will caution you about that put love. I had the same feeling. I'm really that convicted about downside in VIX. I had the same feeling last month about the OCK 18 puts for $1.03. I said, these are a screaming buy. How could I not buy these? And of course, they worked out pretty well in like the first week, and then they just went to die. So I hope you're right. Yeah. I have some 17 puts myself right now. I hope you're very much right, but that definitely disabused me of my, shall we say, motivated buying, sir.
Yeah, I closed I closed my 19 puts early, and then I had a graveyard of like the 18, 17, 16 that was not great. Poor discipline on that one. Like maybe this future is never going to see south of 20 again for a month, and I knew it was happening too, which is the worst part. But I'm like, the market's going up. Paul's got to come in a little something. It's got no. Dude. You just use your head. Anyway, but I used the 50% rule. I got out of half of my puts, but I only felt half stupid. But we'll see. I think overall there'll be a pretty good opportunity. And mostly we're talking 6,000 SPX by the end of the year. That's really what talking to students like. Listen, you like Palantir today up 20%. It's a $50 stock now. They are big stack, teaching all these companies how to use all the money they're spent. Like that was a smart. Okay, I'm going to buy all these NVIDIA chips. I'm going to do AI stuff, and now I need another company to teach me how to do all the AI, use the AI stuff. And that's, I guess, Palantir. So just off to the races. That was what we laughed about that stock. $7, $50.
I got run over selling 8 puts in that. Doesn't seem like that long ago.
No, it was it wasn't. It was 2 years ago we laughed at it.
Yeah.
And I got put that stock just being an idiot and ended up doing great on it. But a total idiot move. Like I got put, I'm like, I'm not selling this stock for like $8. It's dumb. So anyway, but I think that current is still the current that's pushing us. This politics, I think the problem with the rhetoric now is so bad in general because there's so much money in it. Like the U.S. government is spending so much money and distributing so much money now. It's too big. And when you have that many people that want that money, the rhetoric just gets awful. because there's just too many people that they're at that trough. Companies, businesses, organizations, who knows? So it's just not. I don't know. I like to see less of it because I don't think it's a great. I don't think it's great for our political discourse.
All right, listeners, we are at that time here, 7 p.m. Our chat's freaking out about colors. I'll get to all the colors in a second. Our board is starting to light up with some colors. Russell, your daughter must be busy. I'm seeing colors on my screen over there. But let me first welcome on our next guest now. It wouldn't be an election night spectacular if we were not joined by the man himself, a.k.a. Dan, the man Gramza, from Gramza Capital Management. Mr. Dan, welcome to the show, sir. How you doing?
I am doing terrific. Thank you very much. Really excited about exploring some of these markets tonight and seeing how the market is going to absorb all the things going on. So it's an interesting day to follow what's happening here. And I like the futures because I can see how they continue to absorb information. And because they're trading 23 hours a day. So it gives us that chance to see what happens overnight. Right now, we got Asia open, and we'll see what's happening with them.
All right, let me hit some results here first, and I want to get your thoughts on today's maybe somewhat surprising rally as well. What else has been catching your eye across the broad spectrum of the futures market? But here we are now, listeners, 7 p.m. Central. So we have more states closing here. Let's just get to my list of the prizes that are available. Some juicy ones here. 7 p.m. Central. We got Alabama, 9 votes. Connecticut, my old stomping grounds. Everyone thinks it's a nothing little state, but 7 electoral votes there. A lot of people actually live in Connecticut. No one realized that. Postage stamp size state, but a lot of people packed in there, around 3 million. Delaware, 3. D.C., 3. Florida, big prize right now, 29. Illinois, 20. That one probably pretty obvious which way that one's going. Maine, 4. Maryland, 10. Massachusetts popping up now there as well. And then we've got Mississippi, Missouri, New Hampshire, Missouri 10, Mississippi 6, New Hampshire 4, New Jersey 14 electoral votes. So Sopranos territory looking rich. Oklahoma 7, Pennsylvania, some say that is the jewel in the crown this cycle. In the previous cycles, it has been Ohio. Right now, everyone's saying who wins Pennsylvania might win this whole thing. 20 full electoral votes for that. Rhode Island with a sneaky 4. You can hit Connecticut and Rhode Island one day. Bam, 11 electoral votes in your pocket. People ignoring Southern New England. And then, of course, Tennessee with 11 out there. And right now, again, Russell's daughter has been busy. She's been putting in some colors. We've got, of course, right now as they're coming in, we've got Vermont. We talked about that before. Massachusetts, no surprise there. Most of New England usually pretty solidly blue. Massachusetts being declared for Harris. That's 11 electoral votes in her camp. She got Maryland now as well. That's 10. So that brings her up. Oh, she got Rhode Island and Connecticut as well. So that's the 11 I was just talking about, 7 and 4. So that brings her total up to 35 right now. Meanwhile, we've got Trump moving on. He had South Carolina before. They're calling Florida for him now with 55.7% of the vote in for him, 43.5% for Harris. So they're calling Florida for him. That's a big one. Alabama for him, no surprise there. That's 9 votes. We got Mississippi, 6 votes also for Trump. South Carolina for him, 9 votes. Tennessee, 11 votes for Trump. And then Oklahoma slotting in at 7. So that brings Trump now to a whopping 95 versus Harris's 35. Obviously, big ones still in play. Ohio, Pennsylvania, Virginia. We'll be really watching to see what plays out there. All right, Mr. Dan, the table has been set. The floor is yours, sir. Regale us. First off, what did you make of today's somewhat surprising rally? Not just an equities, gold rally and crude rally in today. And then B, what's been catching your eye in the commodity markets leading up to the election, sir?
Well, I'd say a few things. I guess on the stock market, on the indices, a word that comes to my mind, yesterday, I felt it was on the sidelines. It was waiting for a reason to do something. What was interesting for the way I look at these markets, which I call behavioral Japanese candles, is we had a bullish setup. Even though for the last 3 days, they've been selling the S&P, what's interesting is the structure behind it. And so today, when we started to move up, I didn't think today would be as big as it is. But if you go back and look at presidential election days, they're oftentimes positive. And, I've often wondered, Mark, maybe it's positive because our system's at play. The political system in our country is working, and we're having an election, and that's a good thing. But an up day is not unusual. The other time frame that's interesting, and I don't think it'll come into play here, is Asia. It's because the market, as results come out, like you're giving us, the market's going to be absorbing that, right? Is there a bias? Is it moving a certain momentum in a certain direction? And so Asia can be important. But, if you remember last go around in 2020, we didn't know Biden won until Saturday. I don't know if we're going to go through that this time around, but that's something to keep in mind. We're not going to get a result tonight. So then how does the market position itself? And something else too, we got the Fed speaking. We got the Fed telling us, hopefully, what the market's expecting, a 25 basis point cut in Fed funds, which wouldn't be surprising. We've got the economic foundation in place to support that, I think most people feel. And then I think what the market's also going to be looking at are what hints do we get about what the Fed's thinking going forward? Will we have another rate cut, or are they going to say, no, we're done for the year and we'll readdress this next year? So I think the market's going to be looking for those clues as well, too. So overnight, like right now, the S&P is up, the stock indices are higher. But do I look for a dramatic move? No, because it's still waiting for information. And, usually when markets, especially stock markets, when they have uncertainty, which is what you have during the election, you usually see the market rotating back and forth. You see a little more volatility. So far, it has been somewhat orderly. So, can it continue? The S&P is marching along that way. It's the strongest out of all the indices. NASDAQ is up. Dow is up a bit. Although today's Dow action was not very strong, it is showing some follow through in Asia. And one of the ones that's the strongest is the Russell, Mr. Russell. And we have Russell with us, too. How about that? You can't beat that, huh? Yeah. Well, Russell, I have to tell you, your index is looking pretty healthy. And
it's not looked healthy in the last couple of years, but it's finally starting to pick up. It was ridiculous 8 years ago when Trump got elected. Between election day and his inauguration, it was gangbusters, and then I think it underperformed ever since.
The last few months we've been a sideways market there, and we're not out of the woods yet either, but we're getting there near that swing high.
So something you said, Dan, and I teach at a college, so I talk to people that are around and have not really experienced elections in the past. And you used a phrase that we hadn't used yet, but I always have in the back of my mind, and it's the system. And I truly, truly, truly believe in our system. I do. There are checks and balances in our system. I've had this one in my back pocket and been waiting for the opportunity to use it. They often refer to the president of the United States as the most powerful person in the world. I don't think they are.
I don't either.
And the reason I say that is because Kim Jong-un can take his uncle and blow him up with an anti-aircraft gun and nothing happens to him. Our president can do an awful lot. But there are checks and balances in place that that do regulate their behavior to a certain point. I would say that we were debating this. I was debating this with some graduate students, and they were like, "Okay, well then who's more powerful?" Well, Vladimir Putin's more powerful. He can throw 500,000 of his own people into a meat grinder and nobody does anything to him. I don't think the public would allow a sitting president of the United States to enter a war the same way that Putin was able to. So, and that's why, even if you're not happy with the person that wins, and I remember talking some people off the ledge when Trump won 8 years ago, you got to have faith in the system. The system is in place to keep our worst fears from coming true. And, I do think I agree with you that part of the market kind of settling down and working its way higher without a lot of volatility. I personally was expecting some sort of sell-off during the day after about the first hour this morning, just because I expected election-oriented volatility, and I was wrong. And I think that our system, which is not perfect, is better than just about anything else out there. And one of the reasons that I think it's better than just about anything else out there is we're not electing a dictator, and we're not electing somebody that gets to do whatever the heck they want. And Andrew, who was on in the half hour before you, was talking about how, having the House of the Democrats, the Senate's going to go either way. And then, maybe Trump gets elected this evening. Having, things split like that, it keeps things in order. And our system is set up in a way that, we've got all these great checks and balances, and when they're in place and a whole party is not in charge of everything, I actually think it works for the better.
Well, Russell, I got to tell you something that when you brought that up, what brought to my mind, and this was a study done by Stratagas as a research partners. And what they did is they went from 1933 to 2022. They excluded 2001 and 2002 because Senator Jeffords changed parties. So they felt that knocked it out. But if you look at, do you have a Democratic president, Democratic Congress? Is that good? Is that bad? In terms of return, now we're talking about S&P. So just a couple quick numbers. Democratic president, Democratic Congress. The return, average return, 9%. Republican president, Democratic Congress, 4.9%. Democratic president, Republican Congress, 13%. Republican president, Republican Congress, 12.9%. Now, let's go back to what you said. Divided. Democratic president, divided Congress, 13.6%. Republican president, divided Congress, 13.7%. So your comment about balance seems to be the most productive economically on the S&P 500 when we have either party, Democrat or Republican, and a divided Congress. So I think you're right about those checks and balances.
Oh, I think they're good. And I actually had a student from China ask me why every time their government tried to help out the economy, it just made things worse. And I said, because the best thing government really can do is stay out of the way as much as possible, especially, when we're talking about the economy. And, that when you've got a little bit of a split and they have to compromise on things, you in a roundabout way can think of that as being, out of the way, for lack of a better way to put it. So.
Well, you're right. The people, it's interesting you mention it. Last time I was in Shanghai, I was teaching a course for a prop firm, and this issue came up because they were trading currencies. And the issue was, the yuan and where it fits in, and de-dollarization, trying to get rid of the dollar that we're seeing attempts at. And the thing that also separates us from China is they have a managed, let's say, currency rate. They manage the currency rate. The government does. Here, we regulate the currency market. We don't manage it. And, in China, they have a managed economy. I mean, look at the trouble they're having now after COVID with all the real estate that they have. They have a load there that it's really haunting them. And they really haven't stimulated. And, Russell, what I find interesting is we see it reflected in some of the commodity markets. I mean, if you look at copper, for example, copper's been going sideways for quite a while. And why has it been going sideways? Well, China's not there to participate. They use 50% of the global supply of copper. They smelt over 48% of the global supply of copper. And China's not consuming it. We're not seeing their footprints. And the result is we've been stuck in a sideways market. Their economy just hasn't turned on. So that managed economy, like you're talking about, there are some challenges with that. And I think right now, copper and other markets are an example of the lack of China's participation on a global scale.
A lot of people don't realize this, but iron ore, I think that's what it is. And you know this much better than I do. I'm bringing up something that I know 2% of what you know. But iron ore I believe both in Australia and in China is a huge futures market. Yes. And I haven't looked at it in a long time, but I would assume, and that's basically steel. For my understanding is that's basically steel futures, for no other way to put it, because we don't really have steel futures, and that market is a clear indicator that China's not doing a whole lot, but also China might not have a whole lot of money to spend.
Well, that's a good point. Australia is the world's largest exporter of iron ore, and China is the world's largest consumer of that import. So yes, you're right. That's another great barometer that you see the signs of China participating or not participating. And do they have the cash to really infuse? Now, they said they have. Remember, just a few months ago, they said, we're going to put 1 trillion yuan into our economy. Well, it's one thing to say it, it's another thing to do it. And so far, we haven't seen them do it. But they did get some manufacturing data coming out last week, I think it was, and it was starting to turn a little positive. But we're a long way away from them participating, globally in the market.
And I'm looking at a couple of China index futures markets that are open right now. My feeling, and you never know. You can. I've told people you could tell me exactly how a macroeconomic event's going to play out, and I still wouldn't trade it with major certainty because you never really know what the market's expecting. But the two China futures that I've got open right now, it's the FTSE China A50 and the MSCI China A50. I think they're pretty much the same thing. They're both down about 0.5%. You've got to assume with all the tariff talk that if that the Chinese equity market would hate a Trump victory. But it doesn't really seem to be reacting.
Well, I think it's because, and that's an excellent observation. I think it's because it's not reality yet. And is Trump? Why is Trump saying this? Is he saying it because he's going to do it, or is he saying it because it's a bargaining chip that if he gets elected, China's going to be talking? Their attitude towards talking to United States about the economics of our trade will be different than if Harris gets elected. So is he going to do what he's going to do? And the thing, Russell, when it comes to tariffs, we have had tariffs. You mentioned steel. We've had tariffs on Chinese steel since Reagan. Every president has maintained steel tariffs except George H. Bush. All the other presidents had it. But I know it seemed like when Trump started it, it really blew up a lot. But we've always had it. And the thing about it is we both know, okay, you have a tariff, but I'm China. I send my steel to Vietnam. Vietnam goes, oh, steel. They stamp it. It's now Vietnamese steel. Yeah. We buy Vietnamese steel. Same thing happens with crude oil. Russia, do we buy crude oil from Russia? No, not directly. If it goes to Kazakhstan and we buy crude oil from Kazakhstan, we're buying Russian crude. And once it gets refined, and if we're buying that kind of product, you don't know the story. So the tariff issue is front and center, but what's the reality of it economically, globally? And it's what I always find interesting. And you're right. You would think a Trump victory would create a lot of downward volatility for China.
Dan, we've been talking a lot here tonight about these prediction markets, binary markets, call them what you will. I don't think you and I have really had a chance to chat about these since they really started coming online hot and heavy for the election about a month ago. You're a hardcore futures guy. You've been around the space for a bit. Where do you fall on these binary / quote unquote prediction markets? And do you think maybe people are reading too much into these as predictive tools, or maybe not enough? Where do you fall, sir?
Well, I'll tell you what it reminds me of. And you guys probably remember this, and I don't remember what presidential election it was, but I remember some guys off of the SIBO floor making an election market. It wasn't a listed market. It was just a private, I guess you could say, market on the election. And the school that, and I can't remember the fellow who started it, at Ohio, University of, Iowa, had a binary system going actually for quite a few years. I'm not sure if it's still in play, but the issue with it, it's almost like the 0-day options. It's a way to express an opinion, and I suppose cumulatively, does it give us an attitude? Because that's what we're looking for, right? Does it give us an attitude of people? Does it give us a way to look at a vote, a commitment, and or is it deceiving? Do people, if I want a certain candidate to win, do I try to influence the number of options that are out there, a number of positions I take, I should say? Is it totally unbiased? And so I think those are things that kind of float around in my mind. I think it's interesting. And it seems to me, I don't know if this is good or not, but it seems to me that if you look at the plethora of gambling apps that you see out there, you have a large segment of the population is getting used to this idea of on off, because that's really what we're talking about. And so I think we're going to see more of that. The CME came out with the event contract, which I thought was an interesting idea. I didn't think it was a good, I should say, I didn't think it was a very good product because of the way it was priced. It was priced for the market maker, which makes sense. There was nothing wrong with it. It was, if you look at the pricing of it, it's exactly what it should be if you're a market maker. If you're a trader, it's hard to get an edge there because of the way it was priced. And now we have this forecaster product with IB, with that entity promoting out there. Excuse me. So I don't think it's a bad thing, but I'm cautious of it in terms of what it really represents. It's one thing to say I vote for by my action in a market for so-and-so, but is that who I voted for, really? Do people trade their conviction?
Yeah, that's kind of what I was getting at with that. I was like, do you feel, I mean, you've been watching these markets for a long time, especially on the futures side. Do you feel the whiff of skullduggery about these markets, sir, especially leading into a big event like this where billions of dollars, if you're going to spend $20 million buying ads on Facebook anyway, why not spend that much bidding up a binary, right? Especially if you think you're going to win anyway.
Yeah, you know, Mark, it's a great point. I don't know. First, but I don't know how we would track that in terms of saying, look, this is really what's going on. And it may be clean. We don't know that either. But I guess I don't think it's a bad thing, but I'm cautious, I guess is the way I would think about it in terms of what it represents. Can we lean against it? You know what it reminds me of? You guys remember when we first started seeing size coming off the floor, and you could look at, I remember doing things at the SIBO off the floor, but helping a guy on the floor, looking at, hey, we got, X thousand bid at 20. Oh, okay, well, we can probably lean against that, plan on buying, 21s or whatever. But then we started, and at first that worked. But then we started seeing all of a sudden when it got near 20, that order's gone. It disappears, right? The smoke and mirrors of looking at order flow that we started to have to deal with. And it kind of makes me think about that with these things. Do we see smoke and mirrors in there to manipulate the market? Somebody who's good at doing that. Do they, show size at certain levels, but only to pull it to create a certain behavior in the market?
That is the question right now, listeners. Let's check in on how these markets are pricing in. Let's look over at Forecast EX first. Harris kind of vacillating around Trump as well. Trump up to 71% right now on Forecast EX. So if you bought him back when he was down, I think the lowest he got was, high 40s, maybe mid 40s. Then you got a bit of a bargain, at least right now, because you can get out for 71 cents. Harris down to 36%. So if you think Harris is going to pull a rally out of this, then maybe you got a sweetheart deal out there. Kalshi keeps bouncing around. Looks like Trump 66%, actually just ticked up, 67% out there, 34% for Harris. Robinhood also getting in the game as well. I don't think on this computer I don't have a Robinhood account, so I can't access it live. Maybe Mr. Dr. Bix can. But I'm looking here as of yesterday. It looked like Trump was leading 55% to 46% for Harris. They also were bragging 100 million contracts had traded in less than a week on the Robinhood marketplace. So getting some action out there as well. Speaking of action, the action in our election night extravaganza continues, listeners, because if one Dan wasn't enough, we are also joined by a second Dan, the black-hatted one himself, Mr. Dan Passarelli from Market Taker Mentoring, what the cool kids call Mr. P, welcome to our election night spectacular, sir.
Hey, gentlemen, how are you? How are you holding up tonight? Yeah, all right.
Hard to believe, already almost halfway through this thing. Unless Russell and I can make it till midnight, then who knows? Then we're just getting started. And Dan, brace yourself, because also joining us right now, your nemesis in life, the man who I believe owes you, I think it was $10 million from our last
with
election.
Interest we're about there.
From our producers are evil. They put you two on together because yes, it is Uncle Mike Tosaw from St. Charles Wealth Management. Uncle Mike,
how
welcome
the hell
to you
are
as well, sir.
The Welcher is here.
Doing well. Now, I want to say for the listening audience, I have requested information on where I can send the dollar numerous times. I'll do Venmo. I will do whatever, but send it to me, and I will be more than happy to pay my gambling debts from 4 years ago.
Mm-hmm. All right, I'll believe that when I see it.
Mike, he's been on me pretty much every week on our OBC. So where's my dollar from Tosaw? I was like, I don't know. I'm not Tosaw. Contact him. I've been forced as to be the intermediary here on this. I don't appreciate it. So the two of you settle your bets like men. All right, let's go around the horn. Let's start. Let's start the way we went. Let's go out in the order of the Welchie versus the Welcher. Let's go out to Dan. By the way, Dan, looks like you got some fans in our chat. They've been waiting. Like, where's Dan? And,
hey, all right.
I think your mom's in the chat, so she's like, "Where's my son? Where's my son, Dan?" But Mr. P, sir, obviously an interesting start to election night here today. A strong rally out there in the markets. What was catching your eye out there today, and indeed in the lead up to this big event, sir?
Well, I mean, it's been interesting, and it's going to be even more interesting how this plays out. But, you know, my thing has been markets hate uncertainty. You got uncertainty. That's why we were down the last couple of days. And I don't know, there's a lot of psychology that goes into the markets. So I think that maybe today the market just saw, hey, look, here we are. We're at the end of this thing. Nothing that crazy happened. We should get an answer soon. And I think that's why we ended up rallying earlier. Maybe this rally here, I don't know. The research I've been doing shows that I don't think it matters which candidate wins. The market usually rallies within a week following an election.
We got somebody chiming in our chat saying, "Yes, I am Dan's mom." So there you go. Your mom is literally in the chat.
She's Dan. In the other room.
Mom, see, you gotta say, "Mom, get off the computer." You're gumming up the works for everybody else. I love it. All right, Mr. Uncle Mike, same question for you. You're obviously feeling good today. It was an Uncle Mike type of day. What caught your eye in this, I guess, somewhat surprising rally, not just in the equities, but in a lot of commodities, precious metals, and crude rallying today as well. What's been catching your eye out there, sir?
Well, no question. I mean, just watching the post-market action of DJT, I'm guessing that's already been talked about at some stage on this election special. Just seeing the rally, the fall, and the post-market, and going to be continuing to watch that one, regardless of who wins tonight, even if there's a winner tonight. I'm not going to wager that there's going to be a winner declared tonight. I learned my lesson on that one 4 years ago.
Why? You got nothing to lose, man.
I don't know. You want to go double or nothing on something, Passarelli?
Ooh, I like it. Let's go. Let's turn up the heat. Double the stakes.
We'll figure something out, maybe. We'll see.
All right.
But, just what I'm watching on today is we definitely have a rally in the stocks. We've had futures are rallying aftermarket as well, and so people are happy at this point. Our markets are excited, and I think it's just excitement of just we're near the end. We don't have to hear about this crap anymore. That's going to be a nice thing. And I think the other thing that I'm going to continue to watch as this all plays out is going to be bonds, seeing how bonds react to all of this. And just that tonight, there's no surprises as of yet. Everything, all the swing states that have closed their polls are all too close to call at this point. There's been no surprises in terms of like Florida or in Illinois or something like that is going to go to Trump or is going to go to Harris. So nothing's happening as of yet. So there's nothing crazy going on, but definitely excited to see how this plays out tonight in the futures world.
Speak for yourself. No surprises, sir. I, for one, am stunned that Arkansas just went for Trump. Stunned. I can't believe it. just color me shocked. Knock me over with the feather. Yes, we do have some updated numbers for you listeners as we're talking here. A little bit past halfway past 7:30 Central here. I was just joking, but Arkansas did come online. Their polls closed, and they shockingly went for Trump. So that puts him up to 101. That's probably why we're seeing the rally in his levels out there on the prediction markets. And let's also look here. We got some numbers coming in for Harris as well. It looks like they have called New Jersey for her. So Russell's daughter, pretty active out there, declaring New Jersey for Harris as well as Maryland. I think she had Maryland before. So right now, with the declared states, we have Vermont, Maryland, Connecticut, Rhode Island, New Jersey, Delaware, and I think I said Maryland that's for Harris. And then she's up 52 electoral votes, listeners. And for Trump, we have Florida, South Carolina, Alabama, Mississippi, Arkansas, Oklahoma, Tennessee, Kentucky, West Virginia, and Indiana. No real surprises there, maybe with the possible exception if you thought maybe Florida was in play there. So right now the math playing out pretty much as we expected. Trump roughly double what Harris has in terms of electoral, but again, big states still in the offing. And, you know, surprising that they haven't called Illinois yet for her, because usually they call it the minute the polls close out there, but they haven't done so yet, which is crazy. Mr. Rhoads, you tweeted out at the start of the show, you tweeted out your massive array of screens that you're using during the show tonight. Anything catching your eye in the aftermarket fluctuations in the futures right now, sir?
No, I'm kind of seeing the same things you guys are. I'm just gonna.
I'm sorry. As I just said that, your daughter just typed in Illinois right as I said that. So 71 for Harris.
That's not one of her states. Stop saying that.
I'm sorry.
She's Wisconsin, Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania. She's Georgia and Ohio. But it's like she got assigned 8 states and 7 of them are the swing states.
Oh, so they trust her.
So for those guys that are just my daughter's working for AP and she's the person that puts the numbers in that gets sent out to the networks.
Wow, that's cool, man.
Hey, that is cool.
I know.
That is
Very exciting.
Cool.
I know. So
Yeah.
she's absolutely thrilled. I'm thrilled for her. My very, very, very liberal sister just called in a panic saying, Harris is going to lose.
Oh, she watched.
I had to get off the phone with her. Thank you for getting me off the phone with her, so I could talk to you guys. But she, we're talking about, just color. There's one of them right there. But
is she watching the prediction markets, or is she just watching the electoral count?
She's just watching. Trust me, my sister and I are very, very, very different people. She's a wonderful person who has worked her whole life in a bakery, baking bread at 4 a.m. That's what she does. We're very different people. So, she's most likely just watching the news. And is like, well, hold on a second. All the news that I watch, and I wonder if this is happening to some people, where it's all the news that I've been watching has told me that, that has led me to believe that, Kamala was going to win this thing. And it might be, this might be kind of a shock to some people that don't approach these things. I don't want to say neutral, but just unbiased. And I do want to loop around to the prediction market. My PhD is in behavioral finance, and you can't tell me that 66% Trump, 34% Harris doesn't have something to do with a little bit of behavioral, the kind of people that maybe are involved in Kalshi markets are more likely to vote Trump and be more excited about Trump winning than Harris winning.
Are you saying it's just the number of the beast for Trump? Is that what you're saying?
I don't think it's skullduggery like you say, like people are trying to do anything but I do think there's a behavioral aspect to it that is skewing the numbers.
People have argued that Kalshi mostly overseas, mostly crypto head. Some folks call them crypto bros. I won't say that. We have a lot of crypto listeners on the network, but they're saying it mostly skews young, Caucasian and male for the most part. So they're saying it's a skewed demographic. There could be some of that at play. There's probably a lot of things at play. I'm never one to not point out skullduggery when I sense it. And my spidey sense has been tingling about these markets for a while, especially as I mentioned earlier, that big divergence we started seeing on some of them like Kalshi and ForecastEX around October 10th, which really was apropos of nothing. There were no big developments in polling or anything else that would really lead to a massive surge for Trump and a massive downturn for Harris. That's exactly what we saw. Dan and Mike, I'm curious your thoughts on these predictive / binary type markets. They're all the rage right now. People are holding them up as good, if not better, than polls, what leads me to believe that maybe there's some skullduggery afoot, because if they're being broadcast and marketed as polls and trumpeted on the airwaves, it's a poll you can easily buy. So why wouldn't you? So I'm curious your guys' thoughts. Maybe we'll go to Uncle Mike first as the Welcher, sir. What are your thoughts on these prediction markets? And are they reliable? Are they maybe a little bit shady? Where do you fall, sir?
Well, I think that, yes, they could be shady, because if you want to buy the poll like you described. There's no doubt that you can, but I have another theory towards it. I think you could be using those the betting as a hedge. If you're really wanting President Trump to win and you need him to win because of the policies that you need, the tax policies, and whatever the case may be, or the opposite way, if you want Harris to win, you may want to hedge yourself by betting on the other person to win. And so I could definitely see a lot of that happening. I haven't investigated them enough to say, okay, this is where money's coming from, this, that, or the other. But I guarantee you that if I had a business that was based upon who won the election and I needed to hedge myself, I for darn sure would be doing something along those lines.
Yeah, they do offer that immediacy, which is kind of nice out there. Dan, I'm sure you've had a few students, probably more than a few, maybe even your mom, coming to you over there at MTM and asking you, what's up with these binary things? So where do you fall on these, sir?
Well, before I get into that, I feel remiss for a second here. I almost forgot, and I feel like I was being insensitive. Mark, are you okay with this whole peanut thing? Is everything?
Oh yes, I'm very sad for our beloved squirrel, but I think I'll survive, sir.
Because that's what the story says, that Mark Longo was the owner of Peanut.
One or two people have hit me up about that, so let's just put it that way. My feed has been filled with that for quite some time, so I'm more than happy to talk about something else.
All right, so back to the polls. Yeah, it's pretty interesting. I guess, I don't know, I never really thought much about that behaviorally the polls could be skewed. It makes a whole bunch of sense now that I think about it. But yeah, I never really thought about it before. It's interesting. And Mike, I was wondering if you were talking about pure financial hedging or emotional hedging as well there.
Well, I suppose it could be both, but if I'm being emotional, then I wouldn't necessarily put my money where my emotions are, so to speak. But I would think that with all the lobbyists, with all the things that are happening in our country, that I don't know if I would call it skullduggery, but I would definitely call it a hedge in some way, shape, or form. So I would definitely think that from a financial standpoint, if your business is based on one candidate or the other one winning, I think it would be a great way to hedge. That's what we're all about as option traders. Why not do it on the presidential binaries?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting. It makes sense.
Our listeners are giving us updates here on the Robinhood. They're saying 66 Trump, 37 Harris on Robinhood. That was as of 13 minutes ago. Another one chiming in, Trump 105, Harris 30. I think he's talking about, he's talking about electoral numbers. I'm not seeing that. I'm seeing obviously Trump 101, Harris now 71 with the addition of Illinois. We'll obviously know more in a little bit, in about 15 minutes, when the next slate of names goes up. You know what? I've been so into this. We're having so much fun here on the show here, listeners. Here we are already an hour and a half in, having a ball. But I neglected what I said I was going to do, have a little bit of fun. We're trying to inject some levity tonight. We know some of you, maybe like Russell's sister, maybe you're upset that your candidate of choice is winning and or losing right now. So we'll talk you off the ledge. We're going to have a little bit of fun here. Let's go out. Let's do a little bit of presidential/election trivia. How about that, listeners? Just to keep things smooth and nice. Russell, you are AKA Joan Rivers, which, by the way, you like that image they put out of you and I as Johnny Carson and Joan Rivers? Looks pretty good.
I look better in a little black dress.
You do. You're quite good in the little black dress. And I'm sad though you didn't bring alcohol and cigarettes for all of us here on the show, sir. That would be the true Joan Rivers way to be. You are banned from playing Mr. Rhoads because you have access to the answers. But we will go around the whole. Let's do a couple here. Let's do some fun ones. Here's an easy one. Maybe not easy, maybe hard. We'll put it out to everyone. Who was the first president to actually live in the White House? I need my music. Hold on.
I'll buzz.
There we go. All right, go for it, Uncle Mike.
I'll say Jefferson.
That's a good guess. Pretty close to that time
guess.
frame, I will say. I will say close to that time frame, but no cigar. Dan, any of the Dans want to steal it?
Oh, geez, man. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'll throw out Jackson.
That's a little bit later. Dan, I gave you a hint. It's around that same time frame as Jefferson. They were locked in heated battle for a while.
Would it be Adams?
Yes, John Adams, the first one to actually live in the White House. Here's a fun one, which is obvious when you think of it, but then you have to think about it for a little bit sometimes. Who was the only president to win the election unanimously? Only one.
Washington.
Yes, there we go. Yeah. That's an obvious one, but also a fun one. I said Joan Rivers, you're not allowed, but okay, you can play.
Oh, sorry. Nobody else said anything.
Go back to your drinking and smoking. All right, sir, that's fine. You could play if you want to. Just promise you're not going to cheat. All right, let's do a few more here. By the way, you folks in the chat can play too. Our chat's saying they're back. They've disposed of their ballots, so apparently we have some election workers in our chat. They're out there disposing of ballots. All right, let's go here. That's kind of a deep one. All right, here's a more recent one. Name the 2 presidential candidates this century to win the popular vote and lose the electoral vote. It's happened twice this century. Who was it?
Buzz.
All right, Uncle Mike, go for it. He buzzed. He's playing by our trivia rules, Dan. So he's knocking you out. I'll let Dan go next, but go ahead, Mike.
Bush and Trump.
Bush and Trump.
You said that this century that have lost the popular vote, that have won the electoral vote?
I said win the popular vote and lose the electoral vote. So you got it kind of backwards. So Dan Gramza.
Okay, Gordon Clinton.
Was it Truman and Smith?
No, this century, Dan. 21st century.
Well, 21st. Sorry.
It's hard to think we're in a new century, but we are. I'm with you. With you.
Yeah.
So Dan, can you steal this century?
This century.
Lost the electoral vote, won the popular vote, sir.
I'm going to jump in and steal it, Gramza.
All right, other Dan, go for it.
Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead, Dan. Yeah.
I think Uncle Mike was right. I think it's, but he just said it the other way around. I think it's Hillary Clinton and Al Gore, right?
He did say it the other way around, yes. Hillary, which people forget, she won by almost 3 million votes back in 2016. Just doing some research, I knew she had won, but I didn't realize it was that large. It's the largest number of votes ever received in the popular vote and largest margin to not actually win the White House, which is kind of crazy. And then, of course, Al Gore, the infamous one. I know I was down on the floor of the SIBO. I think a lot of us were during that 2000 debacle. That was crazy. It was a whole month of just madness. Dan, what pit were you in back then?
I was in Ford Motor Company.
Good old Ford, dumpster fire of a stock that it is right now, sir. But I was out in Intel at that time, and you're right. It was just every day based on a dimpled Chad or a hanging Chad. S&P's up 50, it's down 100. It was all over the place.
Yeah, that was crazy.
It was a wild time out there. So there we go. We'll do a couple more, then we'll get to some more, of course, got some more data points out here. I'm just having fun with this little bit of levity, a little bit of trivia here, listeners. Here's just one. This is not really a trivia question. This is just, if you think it's so bad right now, everyone's, oh my God, things are so awful. We're so polarized and everything else. I mentioned Jefferson and Adams before. They were 2 friends. They were very good friends. And when you see some of the things they got up to when they ran against each other in, I believe it was 1796 and 1800, it makes what we do today, it just pales by comparison. Jefferson liked Adams, and yet he was repeatedly calling him a hermaphrodite, which was a huge slander back then. In 1796, that was huge. That's unbelievable. That's about as to the gut as you could get back then. And then Adams supporters accused Jefferson of maintaining a harem at Monticello, which I think back then that probably was a badge of honor. Oh, he's got a harem. Yeah. But yeah, that really surprised me. They were going at each other. No punches pulled.
Wait, which one was the accused of being a hermaphrodite?
That would be Adams.
Adams, okay.
You think we're all about gender issues now. Apparently 1796. That was all the rage out there, listeners. So
if Adams was born 200 years later, he could have been an influencer.
Yeah, he would have been.
There you go.
He would have been huge out there. I have some other questions. I love the Jeopardy stuff. I have some other questions for you guys too, though, which is kind of interesting. Another one that we've been kind of mulling around for a while, and Joan Rivers, you're free to chime in on these as well. This is our first presidential election with two major, and maybe major is a strong word, because one of them's the binaries. I don't know if they're major yet. But the other one, which truly is major, is, of course, zero DTE. So we're seeing a lot of different impacts of this now, a lot of them on the volume front, because if you wanted to hedge this event, you could have just waited till today. You didn't have to do it last week or last month, which is a huge change out there. This didn't exist even 4 years ago, listeners. So a very recent development. Where do you guys fall on the impact of these products on this election and on the vol as we're seeing it right now? Maybe, or let's go with the original Dan Gramza. We'll start with you, sir. Where do you fall on this, sir?
Well, impact on the, you said impact on the election?
Impact on vol and the markets heading into the election, sir. So usually we would see a spike in volume, a spike in vol.
Yeah, exactly. But we're not really seeing that. I mean, it's interesting. What you're saying is very logical, and it would be an expectation, but I don't think it's coming to fruition in terms of that kind of action. And you think it would, but I'm neutral on that one. I don't think it's come up to the expectation that people were looking for in terms of the impact of those options.
All right, let's go with the other Dan now, sir. Dan P, the black-hatted one himself. Where do you fall on the impact of these? You think they're maybe muting volume and maybe muting volatility? Or what do you think we're seeing as a result of this addition of this pretty large and substantial new product category this year?
Oh, man. I don't know. I mean, for that, I look forward to hearing everybody's answers on this, and maybe among the five of us, we'll get something smart out of it. But for me, maybe I'm naive, but I feel like, especially the zero DTE options, as far as integrating with election news and expectations, I'm thinking had little impact on volatility in the market. And I don't know, I could be naive on that. I would definitely welcome somebody to counter that. As far as the binaries like Kalshi and Predicted and all that, I don't know. I mean, you could make a case for saying maybe they're stealing some trading away from the conventional market, which I guess you could make a case for that helping or hurting liquidity. But, you could also make a case for, it just seems that whenever there's more trading products that are somewhat fungible or at least related, you tend to get sort of arbitrage or at least pairs or at least dispersion trading or something among them. So I don't know. I feel like I'm just going to say that no, I don't think either of those really affected market volatility with all this.
Interesting. Uncle Mike, sir, where do you fall on this contentious issue right now, sir?
I don't think it didn't affect volatility based on the election. I think it can, and it can have the power to if we have a big event happen. The thing that I always go back to with the zero DTEs, and my study of them, is August 5th, when the S&P, if I remember correctly, was down only 4%, but yet we had a 63 VIX. And when something like that happens, I guess this is just my theory on it, I believe that the panic didn't go at that point to sell S&Ps. There was more of a panic to essentially buy volatility or buy puts on the S&P or buy VIX or whatever the case may be. And that's where the panic went to. And of course, things normalized rather quickly from that. But I think that if we do have some type of an event, and what event that would be, I don't know, because we had more events 4 years ago than at least in my lifetime, based on an election, and markets still remained relatively calm and went up. But if we do have some type of crazy event where the zero DTEs could come into play, is if, let's say we have an event to where it's there's some really big thing happening tomorrow that this state's going to announce their winner. And once they announce their winner, that's going to affect the entire election. And because of that, the markets want one candidate to win or the other, and there might be a lot of fear in the marketplace, and then that might drive up volatility from people buying a lot of one-day options. So I think that's how it could affect it. In terms of how it did affect it, I really don't think it did.
All right, Mr. Dr. Vix, the last word is yours, sir. We've been talking about zero DTE and their impact on vol for a while on volatility views. You know, where do you fall on this and the impact, particularly now leading into the election on vol, sir?
Oh my goodness, there's a huge Palestinian march breaking out in New York in Times Square right now. Is that not the worst answer to that question that you could come up with?
It's a surprising one.
So just a couple of things that deviate a bit from what the other guy said. One thing we talked about how the implied vol is higher for the at the money straddle that closes tomorrow versus Thursday and Friday. I think if we only had weeklies, Friday would still be a bit more elevated because it would have the two risk events in there. So that's a slight change. But the change that SIBO made a while back, where now we use the Friday before and Friday after that 30-day time frame, we saw how that got into VIX when the options that expired this Friday were the heaviest weighting in VIX for 5 trading days, and then started to fall off. So it's just kind of neat to watch. How structurally VIX acted a little bit different than the volatility indices that are based on, the monthly or the third Friday options, I guess I should say. So that's just a couple of product changes that showed up, as we were leading up to the election.
And we are leading up into our next full hour, listeners, where we will be joined by a variety of special guests as we're getting them on board. We'll just give you an update on where we stand on everything right now, listeners. Let's start with which markets and which polls, I should say, which polls are closing right now, and which. Trying to do 5 things here at once here, listeners. There we go. All right. All right. Yes, which polls are closing right now? There are, as you might imagine, quite a few out there, listeners, including some pretty juicy prizes out there. Right now, closing, we have Arizona with 11 electoral votes out there. Colorado coming in with 9, so another juicy one. Kansas with 6. Louisiana with 8. Michigan with 16, another obviously key battleground state out there, listeners. Everyone's talking about Pennsylvania, and everyone's talking about Ohio, but Michigan, obviously a big one there as well. Dial in this number. All right, here we go, listener. Let's go back here. All sorts of fun here as we're playing along here. And then we've got Minnesota 10, Nebraska 5, New Mexico 5, New York, obviously a big one, 29, probably no mystery which way that one's going. And then North Dakota, we've got 3, South Dakota also 3, Texas, a whopping 38 listeners, Wisconsin 10, and Wyoming 3. That brings us up to 432 cumulative electoral votes on the docket, on the board right now. As we're looking, Nebraska declared for Trump. New York, surprise, surprise, declared for Harris. North Dakota and South Dakota all going for Trump. That brings Harris up to 99 and Trump up to 120. So the gap is closing. Maybe your sister, Russell, will breathe a sigh of relief now. As we are joined here in the 8 o'clock hour, 9 o'clock Eastern, by our good pal, the Auto Father, the Oracle of New Hampshire himself, Mr. Matt Amberson from Rhoads. Mr. Matt, welcome to our election night spectacular, sir.
How's it been going? This is exciting.
It's been a rock'em sock'em robots time. I still have some voice left, which is pretty impressive here. How is your day going, sir? What caught your eye in today's maybe somewhat surprising rally leading into the event itself, and what else is catching your eye, sir?
Well, the betting markets are solidly Trump. I'm just compiling my the moves that are expected in the market So I was talking to Gunjan over at Wall Street Journal, and she goes, "Why don't you put what the implied moves are for each day this week?" And I go, "Oh, that's a good idea." So I'm compiling that. Just ran it, so I'm doing that right now, Mark.
All right, and that voice means we are also joined by our next 8 p.m. guest, our old pal. I haven't chatted with him in a while, Mr. John Smollen over there at MIAX. John, welcome to our election night spectacular, sir.
Hey, how you doing, Mark? Good to be here. Excited. Thanks for having me.
All right, John, as we're asking everybody right now, kind of a maybe somewhat surprising rally out there across the board. Equities, precious metals, crude. The only thing that kind of fell today was vol pretty much. Were you as surprised as others at today's move leading into the event? And then what else has been catching your eye in the markets leading up to the election, sir?
I was surprised by the rally and just the strength of the market. With what's going on around the globe, multiple wars, you got a lot of stuff going here. There's a lot of macro volatility that I'm surprised isn't priced into our market.
John, you're a product guy. You guys have a lot of cool products over there at MIAX. Seems like more popping off all the time. One of the things we've been debating of late is the introduction of these binaries, these prediction markets. Call them what you will out there, which have kind of been all over the place leading into this event, leading to some allegations of potential manipulation, potential skullduggery, people coming in and spending money to buy favor for their candidate one way or the other. What are your thoughts on these new markets, sir, and their potential reliability, if you will?
I'm eyes wide open, just like everyone else. It's kind of amazing that they've gotten into the market, but we're in a different world, different time. I mean, just kind of a parallel. You see what's going on with college sports. Who would have ever imagined that? And here we are with political futures. And I have no idea where this is going to go, but obviously people want to have an opinion. They want to be able to, put risk on, take risk off. So, Mark, this is just, it's crazy. It's all new times, The next generation is going to have a lot more fun than we did.
Well, along those lines, we were just talking, too, about the other big product that's really been impacting things for a while and certainly maybe impacting the election and certainly vol right now is just the onset of zero-day options. These products seem like they've been everywhere. They seem like they've been with us forever, but we all know they weren't around, at least in this current form, this ubiquitous form, back in 2020. We've been kind of debating for the last half an hour or so the impact of these products, or maybe lack thereof, on the election. Where do you fall, sir, on the election and also the vol as a result, sir?
The next day options they're here, and they are probably, they have as much to do with what's going on, at least short term. And, they're interesting to watch them, grow. I can't really even give you an answer as to how it's going to impact the election or whatever, but because again, I have no idea where this election is going to go. And my goal today was to kind of just get through today and wake up tomorrow and find out who our president is. But next day options have changed our world. And we have people that we work with at MIAX that believe that option volume in the U.S. is heading towards 100 million ADV because of these products, and these products are coming. So it's wild.
Well, since you mentioned volume, let me just hit on that really quickly while Matt is crunching his numbers there, because there's a lot of numbers to talk about tonight, including on the volume front, listeners. Let's just set the tone here. Let's go back a little bit in history too. I have so much data here, listeners. I have to scroll for days just to find where I put these volume numbers. All right, here we go. All right, coming hot off the presses from our friends over there at OCC. The numbers for October, listeners. So, give you some interesting. Actually, no, I'm gonna hold on to those. I'm gonna go back to 2020 first, because 2020, October of 2020, at the time was the mother of all options months, the banger of all bangers, fourth highest month on record out there. We were saying, my God, things could never get better than this from an options volume perspective. And the ADV was up total volume was up 41.1% from the year before, again, showing the impact of the pandemic, and everyone was stuck at home. October of 2020, leading into the election, the fourth highest month on record. That's probably number 30 now or something like that. We've obviously blown through that. Year-to-date ADV, 28.8 million contracts. That was up 46.3% from the year before. So everyone who thinks we're really getting overexcited about these volume numbers, if you've been around the option space for a little while, not even that long, since pre-2020, 2019, these numbers we're talking about now, just kind of off the charts by anything. Let's look at the numbers hot off the presses for this October from our friends over there at OCC, listeners. And total volume right now was up 13.3% in October. 1.1 billion with a B contracts, listeners. Year-to-date ADV, if you just take equity options, they're about what we were just talking about. 25 million contracts a day in equity options. If you add everything together, the ADV right now, year-to-date in the options market, 47.5 billion. That's a billion. That'd be nice. 47.5 million contracts. So nearly double what we were talking about just a few years ago in 2020. So that shows you how hot things are right now, even compared to when they were seemingly exploding back in 2020. By the way, equity options up 39.7% from a year ago. So banger month for equity options. ETF options surprisingly down 6.3%. Index options also taking a break this past month, down 7.9%. So I think some of that can be attributed to the 0 day. People are just not hedging in the broad indexes the way they used to, because guess what? They don't have to. They could have bought it this morning if they wanted instead. So I think that's been impacting that. Futures down 33%. That's mostly VIX futures, obviously, listeners. So the lone bright spot really was equity options. That was enough to lift the overall volume numbers to up 13.3% on the month. All right, I bought you some time, Mr. Matt. Is your number crunching complete, sir? What you got for us?
It is. Thanks, Mark. It's been interesting to watch since we've been tracking it since July. What is the implied move on earnings day? Like, is it going to move 1%, 2%? And it was like 3% almost in July and even into August. And it has just been coming down, down, down. And even since yesterday, it's down. So except for interesting in the TLT. TLT is up a little bit. So that's bucking the trend, which is, there's probably something there. But what's way down is the Qs. That move is down. So from 2.3% on Thursday's been the biggest day. It's been really interesting. You'd think, the election day is 11/6. The next day after is going to be, no, it's the Thursday, not the Wednesday. So that's the first thing that's been interesting. The second thing is how far down it's come. Now it's a 2% move in the Qs, 1.8% in the SPYs. The one that has bucked the trend, like I said, the TLT. So the interest rates, they still expect those to be pretty busy, and especially tomorrow, they expect those to fly 2.5%, which is a huge move for the TLT. So those are the interesting moves, Mark, that we're seeing in the implied moves in the markets coming up.
Matt, that kind of echoes a point Russell was making earlier here in our election night spectacular. That it does seem like people have not exactly been reticent to take some vol off the board leading into, you just broke down the numbers for us quite clearly, but leading into the election, this is not the normal pattern that we see. We normally see people bidding up vol into all of these big event risks, whether it was, Brexit or an election or an earnings event or whatever the case may be. OPEC numbers, usually we see vol getting bid up, yet folks are taking vol off the table in some surprising ways. That kind of has come as a surprise to me. What are your thoughts on that, Matt? Does that surprise you as well?
Well, if you look at the betting markets now, the betting markets on the election have been getting more certain and more certain. The Biden administration tried to eliminate the betting markets because it was going against their candidate, but it's almost 70-30 Trump. So I think that has something to do with it. They're, as what they think a Trump victory is, and then they're taking Vol off the table. So I think that might have the most to do with it, Mark.
Yeah, it certainly has been a fascinating and some might say a surprising development out there. All right, let's keep rolling out here. You know, John, the question everyone has right now as we're talking, coming hot off the prediction markets. By the way, let's do another check-in on all things binary right now. Harris hanging out even lower. She was 37%, I think, on our last check-in. It's 35% for yes now, 65% for no. This is on Forecast EX. Trump, 71% yes, 29% no. Let's go over to Kalshi right now as well. Trump hanging out 60. It just keeps ticking. With 68 now, 67% for yes, and Harris 33%. So if you want Trump, if you want to bid on Trump, he's getting bid up. If you think Harris is going to pull it out, then maybe you got a deal. We have pointed it out though. Don't expect to be paid tomorrow on any of these. They are going to settle. I know the Forecast EX ones settle on January 7th. These Kalshi ones, I believe, settled. I think they settled actually at the inauguration. We established that earlier. So they're even later than the Forecast EX. Now, that said, if someone is declared a winner, they're going to be bid 99 coming out. So you could sell them. So that won't be that big of an issue. But just don't expect the contract to settle by tomorrow, listeners. It's going to take a little bit longer. So I guess the question we all have, John, is when is MIAX launching their binary market, sir? You guys love a hot new product. When are you getting into this game, sir?
We have we have a big year coming up. We're launching our floor in Miami. Looking forward to that. We've recently launched our Sapphire Exchange, which we're very excited about its progress. New futures exchange that will launch sometime next third quarter. That's the rebuild of the Minneapolis Grain Exchange coming which formerly had been their front end had been Globex, and we will have our own match engine. So, as that business grows, we also, as you know, we still own the former Ledger X that we're going to be, we plan on using at some point in a variety of ways, but we have a great demand for products like this in different, whether it's in financial products or event products or, just straight, commodity products. So, as our development queue begins to unwind and we get more bandwidth, I could see us getting it. We're definitely kicking the tires. I can't say for sure what the date is or what the products are, but it's on our radar and it's got our attention for sure.
Yeah, I mean, how can it not, right? It's the hot new thing. It's the hot thing everyone is all excited about. Speaking of things that everyone's excited about, maybe you love it, maybe you hate it. Either way, this thing has been on the rampage of late. It's DJT. Let's get there now, listeners. This has been just a crazy story to watch. I've been only half jokingly referring to this as a binary play. Tomorrow it's 0 or 100. It's obviously not quite that simple. It's a little reductive, but it has the air, the whiff of that about it, listeners. Certainly the trading has been all over the place. Even today, 31.45 to the downside, 40 3/4 to the upside. In the after hours, it was up about 7 handles in the low 40s. It's given up about half of that now. It's up about $3.50 to about $37.50 is where DJT has been hanging out of late. All of that, a market cap coming into today of $7 billion. That's $7 billion with a B. And yet less than, I think, $1 million in sales in their last announcement. So this is obviously a stock that is not trading attached to any fundamental analysis or earnings or data, anything like that. It's all about the prospects for the election. It's truly an earnings binary before it really existed. Before you could go out and buy Harris or Trump on the binary exchanges, you could have traded, of course, DJT. Got halted today at least once, perhaps more. The saga for this one has kind of been all over the place. It hit, depends where you look. I see 66 intraday back in March of this year. It shows the 52-week high being nearly $80 around that time, so it might have kissed it intraday. The low was around $12 back in September, so it's been on a wild ride for the better part of this year. We asked you about it just about a couple of weeks ago on October 21st. We asked you if you wanted to buy that straddle. At the time, the stock was around $31. We said the 31 straddle was trading $17.80. That's the one expiring this week. So obviously through the election, listener. So it wasn't even a full month. You got a couple of weeks of DJT. That was trading for $17.80. So over 50% of the value of the stock. And lo and behold, the stock rallied to nearly 50 and then right back down again. So that straddle has already paid for itself maybe a couple of times. So it seemed ridiculous at the time. In hindsight, it actually looks pretty cheap. And Matt, I know you're crunching a lot of data over there on all things DJT as well, sir. What's catching your eye, sir?
Well, at 6:30 p.m. tonight, it hit its high of 45. It's down now about 37.5. But from an option trader point of view, one of the things I look at is the implied borrow rate. So what are people paying to short this thing? And it was sitting in the tens, which is, pretty normal for a hot without that much float. But it got up to today 50%. So people are trying to find shares to short. So this is this is crazy. It's amazing that there is a DJT. It's amazing that people are trading it, and it's amazing, and then it has options on it, and we could watch the options and say things like you did about the straddle. But the borrow rate is what I think is pretty impressive. 50% borrow rate. That's like you're paying a lot of money just to short this thing, Mark.
Yeah, imagine the old market maker days. Imagine being a market maker out there in DJT options right now. That would certainly be a wild couple of weeks out there. Our chat talking about it's up $6 on the 24-hour Robinhood market right now, and also talking about the spews. Easy for me to say. Talking for a couple hours here, listeners. The SPOOs getting a little bit of a lift. Mr. Rhoads, if you have anything to add on DJT, have at it. And then B, you tweeted at the beginning of the show your massive, I think it was 8-screen setup over there for the show. Anything lighten up your tape right now as we're coming into the second half of this hour, sir?
Oh, part of the reason this is not a normal setup. I have it set up like this with a couple of TVs so I can watch a couple of networks. And also I have an extra computer that is dedicated to Skype because I want to come through loud and clear.
I appreciate it.
So a while back, I heard a rumor on DJT that he'd actually rather lose so then he can do a media conglomerate on the conservative side, maybe be the next Rush Limbaugh or something. I think that's one of the dumbest things I've ever heard, but that's the only thing I know about DJT. But it is kind of funny. We can trade something like that, but it took a year for us to get a new inverse VIX ETF? Come on.
Yeah, that we talked about
really,
a little bit on vol views, easier for me to say, but they're not quite getting the options volume yet. The underlying is coming in there on there. So maybe you said you were waiting to crunch your numbers. Have you crunched your numbers on it yet?
On what?
On the latest vol ETF. I'm not talking inverse vol. I'm not talking SVIX, of course.
Oh, no. I took a little look at SVol. I was kind of underwhelmed with respect to the performance. I felt like it was something I could do on my own.
If they're not
probably not the right thing to say, but
if they're not whelming the Dr. VIX, then who are they whelming, sir? My goodness, wow.
I know.
You're the target market for these things. Ooh, that's not a good sign, listeners. That is damning with faint praise indeed out there. Interesting stuff. Matt, we were just debating earlier, right before you came on, the impact of the other big product category. Remember, everyone's obsessed with binaries, but the other big product category right now is, of course, all things 0 day. This is the first election where really we have these products in our hot little hands. I think it's reflected in those volume numbers that just broke out earlier. But you've been probably the biggest 0-day proponent I know out there. You've been talking them up for years now on the network and on the advisor's option all the time. You love them as a tool. You love them for market makers to hedge their risks. So you've been a big fan, even when others have been a little bit more, let's say, on the fence about these. So the question we're asking everybody is, where do they think and what role do they think 0-day options have been playing, particularly in vol and in some of the action we're seeing in the indexes leading into the election, sir?
So as you know, I've looked at the data, and immediately after the 0 DTEs came into existence, the put call skew fell to what I call kind of a new paradigm. So at ORATS, we measure it in percent. It's usually around 5 to 10% skew. And what that means is every 10 delta is how much more the lower strike is trading than the higher strike. So that's a lot. Right after the 0 DTEs came in, it went down to between 2 and 5. So it was a whole new paradigm. And I surmised back then, and I still hold to it, that market makers were then able to offload a lot of their normal put bias that they were short and call bias that they were long, since the 0 DTEs were basically flow that was both ways. And it wasn't just 0 DTEs, 1, 2, 3 days. And so they could offload a lot of their normal risk that they had on, and that immediately showed up in the skew that we track very closely. What's happened lately, and I should say, since August, since we kind of had a fall off in August, and I think that shook some of the 0 DTE people. The slope has gone almost right back to that other paradigm, above 5. And that's where we're hanging out right now. So what I'm seeing is the normal kind of beneficial flow that market makers were getting has dried up a bit, it looks like, because the skew puts are so high. I mean, the skew is, you talk to anyone, you listen to your podcast, the skew is high, still high. So, the 0 DTEs, people are a little spooked, and it's back to kind of risk on with the high put skew right now, Mark.
Well, as you were talking, sir, I went and got an update on the race as it is unfolding. We have some big declarations out there, listeners. Harris mostly staying the same, right around 99 right now. I don't see any new additions in her camp. Oh, no, New York. They added New York for her. That was before. They had New York. That's not a surprise out there. But Trump getting some big ones out there, including Texas. Maybe not a huge surprise, but that's a big one, Liz. That's 40 electoral votes. There was some talk about turning Texas pink or maybe even blue. A lot of Northerners have obviously moved down there. The meatball's down there now. A lot of people have moved to Texas in the intervening 4 years, certainly post-COVID. So that has maybe changed the demographics down there a little bit, but not enough to change the results. So Texas going into the Trump camp right now. Louisiana being announced for Trump. No real surprise there, it doesn't seem. And then a big one, Mr. North Dakota and South Dakota, no surprise there. But Mr. Rhoads, I'm having flashbacks to 2016 when you told me those now infamous words, Trump won Ohio, sir, because it looks like he has indeed won Ohio. Your daughter has punched in Ohio, sir. What do you think?
Her night's almost done. Once they call all her states, I think she's good. Although I think she's on her second Red Bull right now. So they say the path to the White House goes through Ohio. And the winner has won Ohio 13 of the last 14 elections, with the exception of 2020 when Donald Trump won Ohio but lost the election. So Ohio means nothing. I just like that I got those two contrasting things right there. Yeah, they always used to say that, and
when he won Ohio 4 years ago, I think a lot of people thought, well, it looks like he's got it in the bag, but he didn't.
It seemed like in 2016, that was the catalyst point for a lot of people. I know it was for me.
It was.
A lot of people, even up until that point, kind of thought Hillary had it in the bag. All the polling data was for her, even with the email scandal going on, rocking her campaign. It still seemed like she was kind of the winner by the end of the day. And then, of course, once Trump took Ohio, that made things seem a lot more real for his chances out there. So now, listeners, I don't know where that leaves you. Does that leave you celebratory or does that leave you sad? Because right now, Trump taking Ohio, I will say right now, it seems like a lot of our listeners, at least for right now, are probably in the happy camp. Now, I should say, we did put the caveat in our poll right now that we're asking you not who do you want to win, but who do you think will actually win the election. You folks have been voting hot and heavy. This has only been live a couple hours here since we started the special. But our poll kind of reflecting the predictive numbers right now. In fact, almost exactly. I think Kalsher's up to about 71%. Trump in our poll right now, 71.8%. 24.4% for Harris, 3.8% for none of the above. So the Brewster's Millions vote out there. Vote for none of the above out there. Listen, we have a few other fun polls. Let's just hit on these right now before we get into the second half of our 8 o'clock hour, which, again, we're going to go till 9, but we could even go longer. There's a lot of stuff popping off out here. I have some voice left. I think Dr. Bix does as well. But let's go out here. We asked you a couple of sessions ago. We saw size puts going up in VIX leading into the big event today, including 100,000 of the Nov 17 puts expiring on the 20th. So you're talking a couple of weeks after the election, listeners. Someone paid 85 cents for those earlier this week. We said quite simply, at that price, are you a buyer or a seller? And almost 2/3, about 65%, said you're a buyer. 35% say you're a seller right now. These are all live right now at Options, listeners, so you can get in there and make your voice heard. We also had a fun crypto one. Crypto obviously being seen for many as a surrogate for this. It's been rallying hard over the course of the last week on the presumption, I suppose, of a Trump victory, him being maybe seen as a little bit more favorable to crypto. We said same thing. A big trade went up in BITO this week as well. It was the DEES 1575 13.15 put spread. Kind of weird strikes, but that's what we got out there. It traded for 63 cents in BITO. So obviously we asked you, are you a buyer or a seller out there? Obviously, if you're a buyer, you're probably kind of bearish on the prospects for BITO. If you're a seller, you're bullish. Or we said, just, hey, wake me when all this madness is over. And right now, 45.5% of you say, hey, just wake me up when all this is done. 32%, though, say you're looking to buy that spread. So you're bearish on all things Bitcoin, and 22.7% say you want to sell that, which means you are bullish on all things Bitcoin, listeners. So intriguing stuff out there as we are coming up into the next half of our hour. So we will be joined by some new people here, listeners, on the old show. You know, the producing, the producing and the hosting out here, listeners. Always fun duty up here as I get our next dynamic duo to join us here on the program. All right, here we go. All right, listeners. By the way, as we're waiting for our new friends to join us here, we'll give you an update on what is popping off, what states are closing, what is available as of 8:30 right now in the markets here, listeners. And really nothing closing at 8:30. Sometimes we have some half-hour ones. We're really waiting until 9 p.m. for the hot names, listeners, of Iowa, Montana, Nevada, and Utah. So in the next 9 p.m. hour, we have a whopping 21 electoral votes popping off out there as we are joined right now. First up at the 8:30 p.m. hour by our good pal, Mr. Scott Bauer from Prosper Trading Academy. Scott, welcome to our election night spectacular, sir.
Hey, Mark, how you doing?
How are you doing out there, sir?
Thank you for having me.
How are you holding up on this election night, sir?
I'm just getting into another beverage and, settling in. How about yourself?
I wish. I've been having energy drinks because I've been talking for the last 3 hours here, so kind of hard to do.
Yeah, I'm beyond that.
Well, sir, let's start.
Beyond that.
Let's start while we wrangle some of our other guests here let's start. Obviously, some interesting, some might say surprising price action in the markets out here today. Usually they wait for the event itself to happen. Not so much today. We saw what could be termed as a relief rally out here. And then also, hold on, let's get back here. Listeners, we got people. There we go. Got people chiming in. All right, there we go, listeners. Could be termed a relief rally, as well as, big moves in not just the equities, but also in gold or precious metals, also in crude, and downside in VIX. What caught your eye out there, Scott?
Well, I don't know about if the price action during the day was so much a relief rally, but the price action of what's going on right now, to me, is a bit surprising. There is, though, this stat. I don't know if you guys have talked about this or not, but the price action that we see tomorrow is indicative of what the next 2 weeks is going to bring. So if tomorrow is a positive day, you can expect the next 2 weeks to be positive, vice versa. But we're seeing, futures up another 50 points, S&P right now. Dow futures are up 400 plus. So, I think whoever winds up winning here, I don't think it really matters to the overall market. This is what is surprising to me right now, just seeing this big of a rally. And, if you want to isolate something that happened during the day today, and again, maybe you guys talked about this, I think it was right around 2:00 Central Time or so, all that volatility that came into DJT when we saw the stock drop 20-25%, get halted a couple times, whether that was betting markets all of a sudden, flipping a little bit towards the other side, causing DJT to go down or not. And the stock recovered, a bit by the end of the day, and after hours, the stock is up. But that one, to me, it really stood out and kind of as a proxy for the election.
Yeah, we were just talking about DJT. Halted, a wild ride this year, down to about $12, up to close to 50. I think actually got higher than that, got up to nearly, 80, that we said earlier this year, back in March. Wild intraday swings today out there. Any of your, I'm assuming for your clients and your mentees, you're just counseling, stay the hell away, or are you trying to do some risk mitigated premium harvesting, sir?
Yeah, so you know what? I got to be honest with you. We talked about this when you and I talked about it last week. We are actually short some premium, not short units, but short some premium, which I didn't think this would be determined tomorrow, and maybe the election is not going to be determined tomorrow. But I certainly thought by the end of the week, we'd have some sort of answer. And, this is a pretty big binary move in this stock, though I do think the upside is more limited than what the downside is, because at the end of the day, fundamentally, company still has no revenue, still doesn't make any money. But we definitely harvested some premium, and we'll see where it goes from here. We have a really wide range. The market was pricing in about a 50% move in the stock, just for this week based on the election. And our premium levels are pretty much out to that on either end. And, we'll see what happens.
All right. We are also joined here at the 8:30 hour by our old pal, Mr. Bill Uliveri from Senecal Capital Management. Mr. Bill, welcome to our election night spectacular, sir.
Thank you so much for the invitation, Mark. I'm honored to be amongst all these amazing options experts.
Well, Mr. Bill, we'll get to all the crypto fun in a second, but I'll ask you the same question I'm asking everybody right now. Kind of some interesting, some might say surprising price action kind of across the board out there. Equities, metals, gold or silver. Easy for me to say. Metals, silver. I've been talking for 3 hours, listeners. Gold, metals, of course, and the crude, to name a few out there today. Listeners, Bill, what caught your eye in today's price action, as well as anything else that's been catching your eye leading into the election? Then we'll get to your beloved crypto, sir.
Sure. Well, I think what's really surprised me is how frequently you guys check Robinhood for results and for markets, something that didn't really even exist a couple of years ago. The thing that's caught my eye the most, and I say this both seriously and with a little humor, and that is Dogecoin is up 47.99% since October 1st. That's compared to the QQQ, which is up 0.98% in the same time frame, and the SPX up 0.07 in the same time frame. So very interesting that Dogecoin, affectionately known as the Director of Government Efficiency / Elon Musk, is just off to the races, as if something's going to happen to this token should the election go in their way.
I have to go find what account I have the Doge in, so I gotta go hit that bid. Excuse me, I gotta go.
Oh, you got to rebalance your portfolio.
Yes, I'm too heavily weighted in Doge right now, so I gotta.
You are now.
Yes, you're right. I am. My allocation has increased. But you mentioned the beloved crypto. Let's get there, Mr. Bill, because we were talking about it earlier out there. We talked about a size put spread in BITO, aka the ETF that tracks Bitcoin out there. Just earlier this week, 100,000 of the December 1575 1315. Again, funky strikes, listeners. Put spread traded for 63 cents. We wanted to know, are you a buyer of that spread? So you're probably a little bit bearish on Bitcoin through the election, or are you a seller of that spread, which means you're kind of bullish on Bitcoin? Right now, the audience, about 32% want to buy that spread, Mr. Bill. 22.7% want to sell it. 45% not touching it with a 10-foot pole. Mr. Bill, what are your thoughts on those results, and what else is catching your eye in crypto and this rally we're seeing for the most part leading into the election, sir?
Sure. Well, I'm a seller of that put spread. I think we have so many things in favor going on the positive side of the ledger with crypto. That is, we had the halvening happen in the beginning of this year in 2024, and Bitcoin really hasn't gone anywhere with its supply being cut in half on an annual basis. So typically, post halvening, we get a little bit of a pullback, but generally when you see that kind of annual supply get cut in half, that's a big deal. In terms of our Bitcoin versus gold strategy, we flipped out of, we were in gold since April, and then we just flipped out of gold into crypto, into Bitcoin, or GDLC actually is the Grayscale Digital Large Cap Fund. We bought that instead because that's trading at about a 27 to a 30% discount to net asset value. So we're bullish crypto now. We've gotten some buy signals recently, and we had probably our second best trade when we got out of Bitcoin after the halvening into gold, which was a counterintuitive move typically for someone like me, who is as bullish and optimistic on crypto that you've ever met. But we just had to follow the indicators. We can't leave our wingman, and our wingman is the relative strength of one asset class to another. So I'm very bullish on crypto because well, you know what? Depending on who wins, one administration is incredibly positive and optimistic, and the other one not so much. So we'll see how it goes.
Speaking of things are going out there on the election front. Mr. Dr. Vix, you are monitoring all the markets via I think there's up to 37 screens over there in the Rhoads HQ. What's catching your eye, sir? Oh, go ahead, sir.
He was at about 40% 5 minutes ago.
All right, start over. We didn't hear you, sir.
Okay, what I was trying to say is Trump just went to 62%, winning Michigan from about 40% in the course of about 2 minutes.
Oh, Kalshi. You saying Kalshi?
That's a huge flip.
They have not declared it, obviously, yet. It's still, AP has it with Harris at about 53% versus Trump 45%. You think Kalshi knows something, sir?
I don't know, man. It looks like, it looks like one of those ESPN odds to win the game things when, somebody gets an onside kick and runs it for a touchdown instantaneously.
That it does out here, listeners. So if you're on these markets, listeners, keep an eye on them for us, and you could chime in here. Let us know if you're seeing any strange things. Speaking of Kalshi, let's get an update of how we're standing right now. Trump up to 73%, so that would certainly reflect him potentially winning Michigan. Harris down to 27%. So if you think Harris is going to pull it out, I don't think she's ever been cheaper, listeners. So if you're feeling that Harris love, or at least you think it's a good trade, then by all means, maybe now is your time to strike. Let's go out to Forecast EX, listeners, see how we're hanging. Harris, similar level there, 28% for her, for yes, 72 for no. Trump up to 79%. Man, that is a far cry from when we were just talking about this back on, it was October 8th, listeners. And I think Trump was somewhere around, if I can pull it up here again, somewhere around that 52% range, I think it was. Yeah, Harris was 52, Trump was 48. So a huge swing for Trump over the interview. I'm keeping an eye on AP. I don't see any indications one way or the other that they are trending with that. Mr. Bill, sir, you said you have some updates on Pennsylvania, sir?
Well, it's just rumor. I had a really interesting. I don't know if I'm allowed to say this, but I had a business meeting with a doctor who is. Her family was originally from Michigan, which has a very, very large Muslim community. And for her, she believed that the word was out in the underground telegram that they were absolutely loving Trump, that they all put out the word to the family and friends. For them, it's the border issue, and they feel that the current administration dropped the ball there. So for whatever it's worth, it's complete rumor, but the word went out on the street in the professional, not necessarily professional, but in the Muslim community that Trump is who you vote for, which kind of is interesting because Kamala spent a lot of time in Pennsylvania, maybe because she knew that she lost Michigan. I don't know. It's just one person's opinion. I just find it interesting.
What else is interesting is, of course, vol and other products like the rates. You can measure that, of course, with an index we've talked about once or twice here. We don't give it a lot of love because it's not really tradable. It's kind of esoteric. It's the MOVE index, listeners. We got some listeners listening and chiming in about the MOVE, saying MOVE index will be in the stratosphere north of 140, the 10-year approaching 4.4%, and chiming in to say very different situation with rates tonight versus 2020. Yeah, when even 2016, when Trump won Ohio, when you said those words to me back in 2016, Russell, that's when we saw the beginning of just the massive sell-off in the S&P, somewhere around 6% overnight. Vol pop, and then, of course, everything normalized the next day. But, Mr. Rhoads, we don't get a chance to talk about the MOVE that often for, I think, obvious reasons. It doesn't really trade. So for a lot of our listeners, it's not really that viable. Are you down with what he's putting down here, that the MOVE north of 140 as the 10-year approaching 4.4%, and a very different situation now than it was back in 2020, sir?
Well, I don't necessarily think that the MOVE index is rising just on the election. We do have that FOMC a couple of days later. It probably doesn't help that fiscally we may question what Donald Trump's intent is as far as the economy, and especially how we're going to treat some of our trading partners going forward. You've got to wonder how that might figure into folks that hold our debt and maybe don't want to hold it anymore and decide to get out of it very rapidly. I could see that having a big impact on not just the MOVE index, but the other financial markets as well. One of the things that I teach in corporate finance at IU is bad things about companies often show up in the bond market before they show up in the company's stock. And you used to be able to do a great job trading Tesla just by watching the Tesla convertible behavior. I wonder if this is a precursor for people to start, to wake up the next morning and go, okay, this is what we got now. What could be the problems?
I think I'm reading into that, sir. You're saying buy Doge. That's what you're saying right now. Go out and buy Doge.
Maybe.
with both hands. Let's go around the horn to some of our newer additions here. Bill and Scott, I didn't get a chance to get your thoughts on the other kind of hot product category. As everyone's I was just talking about it right now, which is, of course, the prediction markets. Obviously, maybe leading what we're seeing out here. I haven't seen any switch yet. I keeping my eye on Michigan, listeners. See if Kalshi knows something. So far, doesn't appear to be the case. They're keeping Harris still at about close to 53%, Trump at about 45% in Michigan right now, according to the AP. But again, maybe Kalshi is in on something. But I'm curious for each of you, where do you stand on these call them what you will, these these binary markets, their efficacy, both as trading vehicles, as maybe predictive tools, or maybe their ability to be manipulated in light of events like this. Maybe Bill, we'll start with you. Where do you fall on these new binaries that everyone's all excited about, sir?
I view them with a suspicion, Mark. In the world of cryptocurrency and blockchain, there's something called an oracle. An oracle is a database that keeps track of truth, right? It keeps track of data, whether it's inflation figures, it could be political candidates some day when we're on a mutable blockchain. But it's just so easy to manipulate at this time. Like, what is truth? Whether you're looking at real inflation, the real inflation figures of 27% about a year ago versus the government saying that inflation was 4%. It's really interesting, right? I think that we're moving in a direction of where these prediction markets and the oracle, which will actually be used to execute Ethereum-based smart contracts. But like, at the same time, I'm still highly suspicious. It's still not fully developed, and I look at them just for fun.
All right, Scott, same question for you, sir. Where do you fall? I'm sure you have a lot of your clients right now coming to you, probably intrigued by these. They are effectively options, after all, binary options. I'm sure they're asking you about these. What do you tell them when they come to you and say, should I be trading these things?
They are intriguing, but I agree with Bill. I think that at this point, it's still very much in question. And the ability to manipulate a market, which I truly believe is what happened, 6 weeks ago or so, not manipulate in a nefarious way, but manipulate because the volume, the open interest was not there, right? We've talked about this, Mark. It's like trading an option that does not have a lot of liquidity or a lot of volume. And so all of a sudden you get a massive buy or a massive sell on a particular option, and it moves the market dramatically. That, in my opinion, is what happened, 6 weeks ago or so. And I don't know that these prediction markets ever recovered from that. So I'm not a real big fan of that. I do think that the binary moves that we saw on Robinhood, Interactive Brokers, where you could literally just buy a contract similar to some of the contracts that you can trade at CME, which are binary, which either go to 0 or 1. I'm okay with those. Some of the other markets, to me, leave a lot to be desired.
Yeah, it would be nice to see, the CME and others take up this charge, seeing these products on venues you've heard of. No disrespect to Kalshi, but no one had heard of them, 6 months ago. And obviously IB has been around for a bit, but ForecastEX is a new entity, a wholly owned subsidiary of IB. So I don't think IB is going anywhere. I'm not saying they're not trustworthy. It's just they are a new venue in and of themselves. So CME, a venue people are familiar with trading futures and derivatives, and they already have the event contracts. They've also fixed the way they use them. They tried to do this ridiculous 1/5 size thing, so everything had to be multiplied by 5, and it just made them much more obtuse for the average end user. They have now fixed that. They are priced effectively the way Kalshi and everybody else does it, which is the way Nadex did it back in the day, which is, of course, 0 to 100, the price being a probability. Everyone can wrap their heads around that. It will be interesting to see. Of course, this is the big event now. Now, after this, we'll probably have to settle back into the usual quote-unquote event things we trade, like will the S&P get above a certain level? What will CPI be? I know Kalshi had the Oscars earlier this year. That's kind of intriguing. I think there's these markets offer interesting opportunities. I remember talking to the Nadex guys years ago, and they would have loved to get their hands on an election market. Of course, the CFTC and SEC said no bueno back then. But they saw their markets very much as gateway drugs, as entry points for new retail traders to discover the world of futures and indeed options. They were coming in. They had a lot of truck drivers and other people who weren't traditional participants in futures and coming in and trading a ton of binaries on their routes, on their breaks and things, or delivery drivers, whatever the case may be. And it was a lot of new people coming in through those products. So I could certainly see these binaries serving that same purpose, being these gateway drugs, these entry-level products for new people to then come in, they nibble on a little bit of Harris or Trump binary, and they say, oh, that was interesting. That was fun. What else you got? Maybe I'll try the S&P. Maybe I'll try CPI. And then, of course, if you expand even further to other things people know and love and watch, like, dare I say it, sports, if you can get into some of that DraftKings action, all of a sudden you have, a binary on Chiefs Dallas or something like that, or a real, truly liquid and tradable future on some of these teams that people know and love. That really opens the door to a lot of cool things. Again, John, I was talking earlier about the product thing. I don't want to get you into any hot water, but you're kind of our product rep on the show and also the exchange rep here tonight. How far do you realistically think we are from that scenario? Not just CME listing election events, because they already have event contracts now, but maybe even breaking into new markets and new products. You think the regulators are receptive to that, Sean?
Not to sports. My sources are that the regulators are not enamored at all with sports binaries. Although there's a lot of work going on, and you could see different products that look and feel like a financial product based on sports information. Binaries, win-loss stuff, that's the big thing. Is if a product is determined by a winner and a loser, I don't think it has any chance ever to become a tradable exchange product. If it's referred to as a hedge, okay, and it kind of meets that criteria, I would keep my eyes open on products that get the label of a hedge product. I do think that I wouldn't, I keep my eyes open on binaries that are based on relevant financial data, such as, we have Matt on the thing and he's the expert on earnings. Is there a slew of products coming down the line based on an earnings number? I could see that being something that an exchange could push forward. Absolutely. And just other financial things that we see every day. But sports is going to be a ways away. On the back, because we have Bill on the line on the whole crypto side. If Trump wins the election, there should be a changeover, in the regulatory organizations, and we might see a bias that is more pro crypto. So more pro crypto says, oh, okay, maybe there's a wider band for different types of product. So it's. I think there's more coming, and if the election goes Trump's way, I think there'll be even more.
It's so funny. This is Russell Rhoads. It's so funny you bring up the changes to the regulatory environment that might come under Trump. I wrote a whole dissertation and submitted a resume when he got elected, and never heard a thing back about things that needed to be done with the financial system.
No joy for that, Mr. Rhoads?
Yeah, and I'm sure it got lost in everything else. But my main point is I totally agree with you, and I think it's something that I hope he does do. It's one of those cool second-term things that I think needs to be done.
You were ahead of your time.
So
I always.
So Russell, based on the people I know down there, it was a good miss for you, by the way.
I appreciate that. Yeah.
Well, Bill,
it was a good miss not going down and wasting your life down there.
Bill, John just invoked crypto. What are your thoughts on what he was laying down there, sir?
I think he was ahead of his time. I mean, yes, perhaps Trump used Bitcoin as a campaign promise, just because it's Bitcoin is a youthful token, a youthful stick it to the man in a way kind of philosophy. If you're a Bitcoin maximalist, that Bitcoin, like the honey badger, doesn't give a darn what president is elected. Doesn't matter whether it's Democrat or Republican. Bitcoin just doesn't care. But having said that, there's also some a huge political action committee, huge donations being given by the cryptocurrency community to congressmen, senators, et cetera, in order to be more pro crypto. And that was led through Coinbase. I mean, if you download the Coinbase app, you can contribute to their, I would call it, for lack of a better term, a pro crypto political action committee. And they've raised millions upon millions, tens of millions of dollars, if I'm not mistaken. And I think the goal would be, and if you watch Elon Musk, is that this after Trump gets in, should he get in, the first thing, one of the top 10 things he'll do is fire Gensler or try to get him out of office, because he been one of the most anti-crypto people out there. Now, I'm not saying that it shouldn't be regulated. I'm not saying that we can't do some better things in the world of regulating, crypto. But the blockchain technology, I mean, it's going overseas. We're seeing it go overseas, and we need to keep that technology here, just like artificial intelligence and many other things. So.
All right, we're coming up on the 9 o'clock Central Hour, which is when we initially said was going to be our end time, listeners. But there's still some stuff popping off, so I think I'm going to hang out a bit. I think Mr. Dr. Vix will hang with me. If anybody here needs to roll off, I understand. I want to keep it open for a little bit to see if we get some more developments out here. As we're talking, it looks like Trump is up to 188 electoral votes right now on the march to 270 here, courtesy of the AP. Harris hanging out at 99. I'm trying to see where these last few votes, I think it comes from. This is another good trivia question, listeners. There's only 2 states in the union that split their electoral votes via county, and that is Maine and Nebraska. So the 2 of them ending with E, M-E and N-E. And looks like that could be where Trump is pulling some of his votes from. He got 48% of the vote in Nebraska, and he surprisingly looks like he's winning Maine, 49.1%. Again, it's within the margin of error. It's 49.1%. Oh, it looks like that's not the whole state, that's just a county. So this is very granular data here, listeners. So if he pulls out Maine, that would certainly be interesting. New England's been kind of a stalwart blue bloc forever. Certainly when I was living there, it was. So intriguing stuff. Mr. Rhoads, as your daughter has her finger on the pulse here. Okay, well, before we wrap up, Scott, if you have any closing thoughts that you want to share with the folks out here about things to watch or maybe watch out for on this election night and in the coming days, have at it, sir.
Yeah, check out the tenure. You know, you were talking just a few minutes ago, approaching 440. It's approaching 445 right now. And you guys were talking about the MOVE index and how volatile things are. You know, I actually wrote a piece earlier today for the CME, basically comparing the MOVE index and CVOL in the treasury market here. And there is a really, really, really deep connection between the two. Though CVOL, I think, hit this big move up before the MOVE index did. So it's something to really watch. And it's going to be really interesting to watch to see if the volatility in the treasury space normalizes as quickly as it typically does in the equity space. You know, going into an earnings report, we know that vol gets jacked up and then it normalizes down. Going into a big eco data report, vol gets jacked up and then it comes back down. I'm not so sure we're going to see volatility really recede in the treasury markets, because there is still a lot going on, especially with the Fed, that can affect this. So that's how I'm going to leave you guys tonight.
Chat is asking us to keep going, so we will keep going just for you folks, listeners. We know you need a kind of down the middle, talk you off the ledge outlet. If you turn on some of the cable news, forget about it. You'll want to eat a bullet. I don't care which side you're on. So hang with us. We'll hang with you. We'll do our service for you for a little bit longer. And right now, if you're in the Harris camp, looking a little bit worse right now. Trump continuing his march. We are right past the 9 p.m. Central Hour, listeners. I mentioned earlier, we have only a handful of states really up for grabs at 9 p.m. Central. We have Iowa with 6 electoral votes. We have Montana with 3, Nevada with 6, and Utah with 6. Utah just got declared for Trump. Wyoming has been declared for Trump now as well. That's from the last hour. They finally called it. Montana, no surprise, going for Trump as well. So that little block adding to Trump's total, getting him up to 198. One of the interesting narratives people have been talking about of late is potentially swinging Iowa blue. Some of the latest polls coming out of Iowa, at least at the start of this week, as of yesterday, were showing Harris had a modest lead, which was surprising a lot of people because obviously that's been read in the past. They showed Harris up by 3% coming into election day today. Now, that was within the margin of error, it was plus or minus 3.5%. But looks like right now it is trending that way. It's pretty tight, though. 49.6 for Harris, 49.1% for Trump. So right now it's tilting, it's tinging, I would say, a light blue, but it hasn't been called yet out there. Before we get to Mr. Rhoads' thoughts, Mr. Bill, sir, are you keeping your eye on the 10-year? You got some thoughts there, sir?
Right. I was just going to say that looking, I love point and figure charts. They're just really clean and they really work for me. But if you go back about 3 years, you'll see that the high level in the 10-year yield index, symbol TNX, was about 4.996. That was on October 19th, 2023. We made a high at 4.996 in the 10-year. Then we had a great sell-off in yield, a rally in bonds, then things turned around. Then we made another high in the yield index at 4.737. That was in April of 2024. Once again, yield declines, bonds rally, and we just now, like today, made another high in yield at 4.365. So if you're a technician, you draw lines from each of those highs, and the 10-year rallied right up to its downward bearish trend line. So I think Bowell's going to be pulling back in the 10-year. I think we're going to see a decline in the yield index or a rally in the 10-year bond. Lower 10-year rates. Just from a technical standpoint, I just find it really interesting. Again, going back, more than a year, we've just perfectly touched these bearish trend lines on the way down in yield. So let's see what happens. I know we have a couple of our clients that we do cash secured puts for. We're actually in the TLT, like we're selling TLT cash secured puts, just because we think yields have gotten a little bit ahead of themselves here in this decline in TLT.
Mr. Rhoads, sir, obviously this map is evolving. Sounds like your daughter's night has been busy, sir. What's catching your eye on these evolving electoral results? And also, if you have any other thoughts on rates vol, have at it, sir.
Well, not necessarily rates vol, but just kind of from the fundamental side to echo what Bill was just saying, what it's really going to take. We're all hung up in the election, but we're going to get right. We're going to get back to the economy very quickly. In fact, we're going to get back to the economy by Thursday. And then we're going to start paying a bit more attention to economic numbers and a little bit less attention to the election. Hopefully, I actually am pretty confident we're going to find out who wins tonight. But with respect to the rates, it's going to take a change in the fundamentals, which what I mean by that is we're either going to need to see the economy slowing faster, or really what we're going to hopefully not see, but I'm afraid we may see, is an increase in inflationary pressures coming back around. And if we see that happen, I think that's when you see 4.5 plus on the 10-year.
All right, let's look at the rest of this map, listeners. And again, if you're in the Harris camp, the way the AP is coloring some of these right now, not exactly trending in her favor. They are starting to pencil in Pennsylvania red, Mr. Rhoads, here on the AP map. I'm not sure if you noticed that, but that is interesting. That shows AP indicating he's leading. 49.9% for Trump right now in Pennsylvania, 49.2% for Harris. As many have said, whither goes Pennsylvania, so goes this election. They're also coloring Wisconsin. Again, these are not official. These are just light shadings. They could change. Wisconsin, 49.9% for Trump, 48.4%, just ticked 50.1% now for Trump, 48.4% for Harris. Minnesota, 57% for Trump, 41% for Harris. I'm not sure what they're waiting for here, unless they need more counties to come in. That's a strong one. Iowa, now, we just talked about it maybe going blue. Well, it just changed to the red column here, but not fully. They haven't called it yet, just leaning red. 50.4% now for Trump. So obviously these are still pretty fluid. Georgia, they're coloring slightly red, listeners. 52.2% for Trump versus 47.2% for Harris. North Carolina, also, they're leaning Trump 52% roughly versus 47% for Harris. Virginia, another big one Russell was concerned about earlier tonight, 49.8% right now for Trump, 48.6% for Harris. So if you just glance at this map, you would say it's looking pretty firmly in the red. New Mexico, maybe no surprise there, 52% for Trump, 46% for Harris. Arizona, same deal, 49%. Actually, this one's showing it as a dead heat, 49.6% each. That's kind of interesting. Maybe Arizona more in play than some thought initially. Then we've got, obviously, Oregon coming on early, too, saying 71% for Trump right now. But that is, again, very early going out here. So, yeah, they're saying 0%. So, obviously, that's about 1% of the votes have been counted. Right now, 34% counted in Arizona. We've got only 2% in Minnesota. So, yeah, ignore that number, listeners. Wisconsin closer, 40%. So that Trump lead might be more meaningful. Only 34% in Iowa. So that number could go anywhere. Georgia, they're up to, they say 81% of the votes. Now, Georgia was the one saying they're going to be the last to report their numbers, I thought, this week. Maybe not till Thursday or Friday. So if they have 81% of the vote counted, then maybe we will get a number out of Georgia sooner than we thought. North Carolina, 68% of the vote counted, now at 52% for Trump. And Virginia, 64% of the vote counted with 49.6%. I know, Russell, you were really keying in on Virginia before. Does that surprise you that they're coloring it light for Trump now?
Not completely. And the reason that Virginia and North Carolina, which is also kind of leaning toward Trump, they both kind of share the same demographics when you get outside of the D.C. area. But the night's going long, and I can't remember who I said what to who, what I said to different people tonight. But I think I talked about how my daughter, she goes to George Washington in Washington, D.C., and she's in the political science department. She said about half the people she's friends with voted for Trump. I think there are a lot of people that you would never have expected to vote for Trump actually voted for Trump. And that would include a lot of moderate type people in the North Carolina, Virginia area.
Yeah, clearly this map reflecting. Harris just got something. She's up to 109 now. She got Colorado, listeners. So 10 electoral votes in Colorado. AP calling it for Harris. Roughly 56% for Harris versus about 42 for Trump. So pretty sizable. That's only about half of the votes counted. So that's obviously going to change, but a pretty sizable, looks like, win there for Harris. Also, I'm not sure if they counted Maryland earlier, but Maryland now in the Harris camp as well with 10 electoral votes as well. So there we go. A couple, if you're feeling blue, quite literally, on the Harris side, there you go. There's a couple of data points to maybe make you feel a little bit better out there. Still looking at New Hampshire, which is kind of interesting. Usually they could count that one pretty firmly. Now exactly half of the votes counted. Hopefully Matt went out and voted. He was joining us earlier tonight, listeners, from the shores of New Hampshire. Man, what a representative special we've had on the show tonight. A lot of Northeasters, of course, Maine, New Hampshire. We had a lot of Chi-Town area, Germany, you name it. People beaming in from all over. People in the chat, obviously, from all over as well. So fun to see so many people are interested, paying attention to what's going on out there. It's good to be informed. Hopefully you did your civic duty as well out there and actually voted, listeners. It took me 3 times here in Chi-Town to actually cast my vote. I went twice, and both times the waits were about 3 hours. So I said, yeah, I just can't wait 3 hours. I have other things I have to do. Third time was the charm. I only waited a mere hour and a half to cast my vote here in Illinois. So things were obviously, people were motivated. People wanted to get rolling. Mr. Bill, I hear you saying, looks like we're hitting new all-time highs in Bitcoin, sir.
Oh, the second I put that in the chat room, it started peeling back. So
you killed it. You killed it.
I know, right? So Bitcoin all-time high was on March 14th, 2024. It's 73,796. While I was listening to you talk, literally I think he had used the word Colorado in a sentence. It was 74,500. It's now peeled back to slightly below its March 14th, 2024 high of 73,670. So it's dropped about, $500 per token. But, the night is still young.
I've got news-ish. You ready? You ready to hold on to your hat?
Go for it.
The odds of a Republican sweep just jumped from 45% to 80%. That would be a shock.
So you're saying not just president, but House and Senate as well?
House, Senate, president.
Wow.
Yeah.
That seems to be the one thing no one wants. One party in control.
Yeah, that's that's like if you're looking at the VIX futures on the on the session lows, which they're hovering around 17 or so, or low 17s. Maybe you see that if you think that number's right, you might want to scoop them.
Yeah, speaking of scoops, some people in our chat saying maybe it's time for some YOLO trades on Harris. Well, if you wanted it, she's never been cheaper. Let's do another check-in here on the prediction market. She's down to 26% on Forecast EX right now, listeners. And on Kalshi, she's about that same level. So we're starting to see, oh no, I take it back. On Kalshi, she's getting killed. 13%. You're just 14. She just ticked down. So if you want Harris, listeners, on Kalshi, there is definitely a huge Republican wave on Kalshi right now.
Right.
Which is kind of interesting. Again, Kalshi is also the market where the whale, actually, look, that was on the other one, which is the name I'm blanking on right now. So it wasn't Kalshi. But yeah, I don't know. Russell, you work with the Kalshi folks. How much stock, pun intended, are you putting in these numbers?
Well, I understand that it's not the most liquid market, et cetera, but to move that market, you have to spend money. And, what would the motivation be behind, bidding up Donald Trump to win president and paying up to 88 cents to get $1 back? So I always put a lot of credence everybody can have an opinion. That's great. But if you have an opinion and you start to put money behind it, you've got to really believe in that opinion.
Yeah, well, you don't have to believe as much as you did. It's only 13 cents on Kalshi now, so you could take a flyer. It was at least half a buck not too long ago. So yeah, if you're down with what some of our folks are saying that maybe it's YOLO time, then Harris has literally never been cheaper that I've seen. At least on Kalshi. Forecast EX, not quite there yet. 26% out there. And again, I haven't. Our chat's been giving me Robinhood. I haven't had it. This machine does not have access to that right now. So, yeah. But this big spike, Kalshi, they're either ahead of the game, or they're feeling their oats on something that isn't really there, or maybe there's some skullduggery, or maybe it's all three. But yeah, Kalshi does seem like they're leading the curve on this, whatever that means. Are they trying to maybe a little bit of causality? They think if they bid this up, the other markets will follow suit and it'll be a bit of a fait accompli? Or is there something else? John, I hate to keep going to you as our product guy, but you are our product guy out there right now. What are your thoughts on these kind of dramatic moves we're seeing out here on platforms like Kalshi that so far, I mean, obviously the ARB is not really that set up yet, not that yet established across these different platforms, but still some huge outliers on these platforms. What are you thinking, sir?
I don't know. This is the first time around for these guys. I don't know who their clients are. You just don't know. I mean, I don't know how their technology is. Are they? Yeah, I'm not saying that they're having any problems at all. I'm not suggesting that. It's just there's just so many things that the first time around in this that you kind of need to learn. I think that if you as they mature and go forward and they do more things, you'll have a better handle on it. But I just don't know who the users are, and I don't know if people are panicking or not panicking, or is there any electronic trading going on here? There's so many questions. I can't even give you a guess. It's just It's just too early to tell.
All right, Polymarket is the one I was trying to think of before. Polymarket is the one where it's only available to international users. That is where the infamous now French quote-unquote whale was manipulating things clearly in favor of Trump. What his agenda was he just a believer? Did he have some other axe to grind? Was he funneling markets from some foreign entities to try to skew the numbers one way or the other? People have been debating that. Are we seeing something similar play out on Kalshi? I would just say be cautious with these markets, listeners. John's been around for a while. He's been through a few of these. He runs a lot of these things at an exchange now. He's telling you maybe be cautious out here. We don't really know who the end users are. It's obviously more liquid now than it has ever been. Looks like they have about 301 million. That is total value has been traded on these markets. So they're a little bit more liquid now than they were, but still, it's not the S&P. It's not VIX. You can move these things with not substantial sums of money, at least not to the large institutions who would be doing these kinds of things. So just something to bear in mind. If you're angry at what you're seeing on one of these platforms for whatever reason, you don't think it's real, it could very well not be. So something interesting, like Kalshi turned on Michigan a while ago, and Michigan is still looking blue right now. Of course, only 20% of the votes counted here so far for Michigan listeners. So, this map kind of shaping up the way it has in years past. Obviously, Ohio's a big one. Florida's a big one. But we have traditionally seen this Republican spine up the center of the country. And a lot of the other areas, then you have the big populous states that the blues usually win. So you have your New York, your Illinois. Pennsylvania's a big one. If that goes to Trump, going to be kind of hard to dig out of that hole. Obviously, we're still waiting for California. Good to see they've taken Oregon off their map now. They had really no votes counted. I'm not sure why they were disseminating a red for Oregon. So obviously, Washington, Oregon, Nevada, Idaho, still waiting for data out there. Arizona and New Mexico. They're showing those as blue right now. So obviously, they have some more data still to come in on those, I think. So intriguing stuff all across the board out here. I'm just looking to see. We got people doing the YOLO trades out here. I know, Mr. Dr. Vix, have you been slinging any VIX or UVIX into the actual election night tonight, sir?
Nah, I kind of sidelined around this thing. I really still don't know. If you tell me that it's over and either of them won right now, I really don't feel like I have a good handle on how the markets would react. And I worked at a hedge fund years and years and years ago, and the main guy, I was in charge of the research effort, and the main guy there loved to trade earnings. And there was a trader there that had probably a couple of decades on the main guy. And he said, instead of trying to guess earnings, why don't we try to trade the reactions? So that's kind of how I'm approaching what we're looking at right now. I've been short. I made no bones about that it has not gone particularly well. Thank God I mix it with some other things. But I've still got a little bit of a short position on it. That doesn't really have anything to do with the election.
All this talk about vol, I haven't mentioned UVIX all night, Mr. Dr. Bay. Isn't that surprising? That's kind of surprising to me. Off about $0.50 today, trading 486 at the close out here. I thought for sure you'd have a little nibble on UVIX. You've been Mr. Secret Weekend UVIX. This is not quite a weekend, but it's a big event. Would you, is just too much of a roller coaster for you, sir?
Too much of a roller coaster, and this would be considered for the overnight UVIX trade. This would be considered a binary event.
Yeah.
We're going to go one way or the other, with respect to volatility. Because in the stock market can do three things. Stock market can sell off, volatility goes up. Stock market doesn't do a whole lot, volatility goes down. Stock market goes up, volatility goes down. So using one of the volatility ETPs around an event like this really is more of a binary event than some other ways of trading these things.
Mr. Bill, we were joking earlier about Doge and crypto, and obviously you like yourself a little bit of crypto, but folks may not know at Senecal you're also managing quote unquote traditional money. So of course your fixed income, your S&P, all that fun stuff. How have you been positioning heading into the election? Have you been kind of on the sidelines? I know you've been getting back into harvesting a little bit of the old risk premium. Is that what you've been doing? What have you been up to with the quote-unquote traditional money, sir?
Oh, exactly. I mean, as much as I believe the market is, we talk about extremes, the S&P 500 at, all-time highs, and the 10-year and 30-year at the low end of the range. The traditional asset manager wants me to rebalance, makes me want to sell equity and buy fixed income. But I have to say that none of our trend lines are bearish. There's just no reason from a technical standpoint to sell anything here. So I've been holding out, but what uninvested cash we do have, rather than letting it sit just in plain cash earning virtually nothing, or putting it into a money market fund earning maybe 4.125%, we have just really gotten in touch and reconnected with our options background, and have just been flinging a lot of cash secured puts, using up that cash in our rollover IRAs and the qualified plans, the qualified money. So we've had a great run since we started doing this in August. Our clients are loving it. They still don't fully understand how the cash secured put works, but I do send out a newsletter all the time and been posting things on LinkedIn. But I tell you, it's been so much fun selling these weekly options, collecting, 0.6, 0.7, 0.8, 1.5%, just or like over 10 days, in some of these weekly options. And the handful of clients that I would consider my crypto degens, we're selling downside puts in MSTR, downside puts in Coinbase. And we know that if things reverse and we get hit on it, we're okay with it, because these are blockchain/cryptocurrency centric companies. And so, again, we are still, I would say, 75-20 in terms of our traditional asset allocation, and the 5% or more of cash that we're playing with. It's just boom, hitting singles, boom, boom, hitting singles. And I just love watching, our theta number grow every day that goes by. So it's been incredibly exciting and fulfilling.
Watching the theta. You sound like your old school market making. Watching your theta numbers. Again, I love it. I will happily accept 0.5% of your management fee just for getting you back on the weekly options writing tip. That's all I want. Just 0.5%, sir. And
Mark, I owe you a lot.
You can really put it in Dogecoin, my favorite thing. You know I love myself some Doge out there.
No, you're getting Toncoin, remember?
Oh, Toncoin, yes. Yes, Toncoin, my other favorite. Maybe a little Polygon. A little Tron wouldn't be the worst. Throw a little Tron in there in the mix as well. Nice sprinkled the Tron cherry on top of the sundae. There we go. Now we've got the delicious crypto sundae out there, listeners. We're getting silly here as we're winding down. Let's go out. If you were excited about all 3 electoral votes in D.C., if you were waiting for those tonight, listeners, then I have good news for you. They have been decided. Surprise, surprise, they went for Harris. So that brings her up to 112. So if you were out there lamenting, hey, Harris can't get any love, bam, there you go. 3 whole electoral votes for Harris. That brings us up as we're coming in on the 9:30 time slot here in the one true time zone, listeners. We're seeing Trump at 198 and Harris hanging out at 112. All right, listeners, that music means we've come to the end. Man, time flew by. Mr. Joan Rivers, it's been 3.5 hours we've been talking. How's your voice doing, sir?
I'm doing all right. I'm hanging in here.
Maybe you should have held off on that last.
I'm not gonna call anybody a tranny tonight.
Oh, jeez. No. We were so good. 3.5 hours.
I saved that to the
right
end,
at the end.
Man. And also, you guys were talking. You brought up hermaphrodites earlier.
But that was in a historical context. That was perfectly acceptable.
Well, so was what I just did.
Yes, Joan Rivers, that noted historical figure, the historical legend that was Joan Rivers out there. You should have saved that last pack of Marlboro Reds. I think it's leaning on your voice out there, sir. Well, I want to thank everyone. Good.
Oh, no. Go ahead. You go ahead. It's late.
I just wanted to thank everyone who took the time to join us here on the show tonight. Of course, we had Aash beaming in from Germany, residence capital. Kevin Green from the Schwab Network. The Rock Lobster beaming in from the land of the pit. Dan the Man Gramza holding court on all things futures you could possibly imagine, listeners. We had Uncle Mike talking his bullish and his bearish and getting mad about having to owe Dan Passarelli $1 from our 2020 election night spectacular. I'll allow those two to hash it out. I think they went double or nothing, but I didn't hear what the actual bet was, so I don't know if you have a new bet. Of course, speaking of which, we had our buddy Dan P. joining us tonight as well from MTM. Then we have, of course, Mr. Matt joining us from Rhoads. Check out everything they got cooking over there. A lot of cool stuff, including their rogue AI known as Otto. We had Mr. Scott Bauer from Prosper. And of course, a lot others, many others, I should say, a lot of others. Been 3.5 hours, listeners, many others, including Mr. John Smollen. Thanks for staying on with us tonight till the end. A little extra time, a little longer than we planned, Mr. John. Thanks for joining us. If you want to leave the folks with any words of wisdom, have at it, sir. The floor is yours.
Keep trading, enjoy the markets. I think the next year is going to be really an interesting market to trade, and enjoy. And good luck. Thank you.
Any hints, any teases you want to leave with us for what's coming down the pike from MIAC, sir? What can we look forward to?
Just pay attention to what we're doing in the futures business. I think we're going to create a lot of opportunity for a lot of people on this phone. And I'm very excited to see where our company goes.
All right, you got to check out the hot new show on the network, sir. It's blowing up. The Futures Rundown. Folks are loving it. I never thought I'd be talking this much futures, John, but the folks demand it. So they're loving it. The Futures Rundown. You folks at MIAX should check it out if you're getting more into the futures game. And Mr. Bill, I know you're going to join me one of these days on the Crypto Rundown again. If you want to leave the folks with any final words of wisdom on this very tumultuous, maybe heartbreaking, maybe heartwarming for some election night, sir, have at it.
You know, what I always say is put on the trade, manage the risk, because you can just have this paralysis by analysis, trying to wait for the perfect moment to put on the perfect trade, and it very, very rarely happens. The extremes are easy. When the markets are crushing and, blood is in the streets, it's easy to buy then. And when things are getting too out of hand, it's easy to take a few chips off the table. But we kind of get locked up in our own mind when things are in the middle of the range, middle of the bell curve. So put on the trade, manage the risk.
There you go. And if folks want more words of wisdom like that, maybe sign up for your newsletter. Where should they go? What should they do, sir?
Sure, they can. Actually, the easiest way to subscribe to our newsletter right now is on LinkedIn. To look for us, Bill Uliveri, on LinkedIn and subscribe to our newsletter. We started putting them out about 8 weeks ago. It's been pretty successful. We had a lot of people reach out to us, in LinkedIn messages. Or you can always go to senecalcapital.com, senecalcapital.com, and just send us a quick blurb in the form handler, and we'll get you subscribed to our newsletter.
So if you can't spell Uliveri, listeners, then just go to Senecal Capital, Cenacle. Why don't you spell Uliveri for the folks? I know it's easy for you. For the listeners, maybe not so much, sir.
That's funny.
Uliveri, spell it for the folks, Mr. Bill.
Oh, I'm sorry. U-L-I, V as in Victor, I-E-R-I. That's a tough one. Just go to senecalcapital.com.
There you go.
Too many vowels.
Senecalcapital.com. That's a hard one. And last but not least, Mr. Rhoads, sir, you did a more than passing job as my Joan Rivers. A little bit more drinking and smoking than I expected. But, you're getting into character. I expected that. Did you have fun, sir?
I had a great time. Can I leave you with one last shocking stat from Kalshi?
Leave us with as many as you want, sir.
Okay. Donald J. Trump just went from 32% chance to 64% chance of winning the popular vote.
Wow. That would be a first.
They've got him at 80% Pennsylvania, 85% to win the whole thing. It's just amazing to me. And if these markets lead what we see on the states, maybe we just have to start using the betting markets to figure out who the president should be.
Maybe. I will say Harris has taken a little bit of an uptick. Harris right now, 18%. She ticked up from 12. So some folks, I guess, going for some value trades.
There's the value trade
on Harris right now. So there you go, listeners. If you want a little bit of an uptick, if you were waiting for that, there you go. Speaking of waiting for things, got so busy with the rest of the show, I didn't even mention this here. But as a reward for all of you who hung out till the very end, a little bonus for you. If you're listening right now and you want to say, hey, I'd like to have more of this in my life, You want to get some access to, let's say, some fun pro content. You want to get, let's say 2 shows a week coming at you, including Options Oddities, where we talk about unusual activity, as well as, of course, awesome pro Q&As, where we get a lot of people on the show tonight, as well as many more leading minds from the world of options and derivatives, and pick their brains for the benefit of you, the listener. If you never had a chance to try it, maybe you just didn't have the cash up front to try it, well, guess what? No cash right now for you folks listening to this, and we'll put it at the end of the podcast as well, so the folks who tune in at the very end, listen all the way through, you get rewarded. You head on over to theoptionsinsider.com/pro right now. This will be live for a little bit here. And just use the code TRYPRO3. That's the code, TRYPRO3. You're going to get $150 in your pocket because we're going to give you 3 months for free. Come in, kick the tires, and light the fires. See what all the fuss is about. We're just feeling generous. We know this is a tough night for some people. This maybe makes it a little bit easier for you. 3 months free, $150 on me. Go have fun. At the very least, that'll get you all the shows for the next 3 months. It'll get you in the hat 3 times for the pro Q&A, it's been 3 hours, 3.5 hours, listeners. That'll get your name in the hat for the giveaways as well. So you get your name in the hat 3 times for the pro trading crate. Trust me, you want to win one of those. That adds a ton to the value. Some of these things we give away literally have no value because they are priceless because there's only one of them. Yet we give them to our listeners because we're nice like that. So that gets you your name in the hat for those, as well as exclusive content that goes up there and early releases. Lots of fun stuff hits the pro out there. So theoptionsinsider.com/pro, TRYPRO3 is the code. I'm not sure how long it's going to be active. That's up to the producers out there. So if you're listening to this, don't mess around. Go to the pro. Get it, try it. You can also listen to everything we've done for the last 3.5, 4 years on there as well. Gives you access to all the archives, the exclusive pro podcast feed. Heck of a darn deal, if I do say so myself. So if you're upset tonight, you need a little something to take the edge off, or maybe you want to celebrate. Either way, $150 in your pocket just because I like you folks. Theoptionsinsider.com/pro. All right, that's it. I got to go have maybe a Joan Rivers type beverage. And we'll keep an eye on the rest of these markets. Back again, no rest for me, listeners. I'm back talking futures tomorrow on the Futures Rundown, as well as Options Bootcamp. How much voice will I have? I don't know. And then back again for the rest of our usual array of content. I know it's crazy times out there, listeners, so I mean it more than ever. Stay safe out there. And thanks for joining us for our 2024 election night spectacular.